Welcome to the Anti-Social Podcast. My name is Andy, funnily enough. Who would have thought, hey? Thanks for tuning in. I've got a extremely epic and lengthy episode for you. As you would have seen when you download the episode, you would have seen the time length, so I don't have to surprise you now with what you're in store for. But if music, the music industry, being in a band or anything like that is of interest to you, I highly recommend listening to this episode in its entirety. I've got my friend Anwar Rizk, I probably pronounced his surname wrong, sorry Anwar, who has spent a considerable amount of time chatting to me on this episode. Known Anwar for quite a few years, and Anwar, for people that do know him, he's probably most known for his contributions and affiliation with the Metal Obsession website, metalobsession.net, which is an Australian-based metal webzine that caters for the exposure of a lot of Australian metal acts, but also some international music as well, and especially covers any international tours that come to Australia as well. The website's been around for quite a number of years. The guys focus on articles on bands, interviews, reviews. They have a fantastic gig listing, so anybody that isn't aware or struggles to find who's playing where in Australia, or somebody from overseas who ever wants to come to Australia to visit and wants to see some metal shows here, or metal or rock shows, Metal Obsession's gig guide is probably the place to go. I actually don't know of any other Australian gig guide that's probably as good when it comes to the genre of metal anyway. So that's something that just straight off the bat I would recommend a lot of people at least to check out. It's a good way. I even encourage bands to regularly check it out when they're booking their own shows, just to make sure and try and avoid upcoming gig clashes, because sometimes you do lose track and you pick a date and you think that looks great, and then you find out that every Joe Blow and international band is playing on the same night or the same weekend. So it is a good resource, not just for punters, but for musicians and booking agents and whatnot. Anyway, I digress. So it's quite interesting because I had, in my little podcast notebook that I wrote out a series of topics and questions and things to touch base on, to talk about with Anwar. And I won't go into detail of what they all were, but let me just say that I got started on probably the first or second question, and then we went off on a tangent. And we spent a considerable amount of time talking about the issues around the Sydney music scene, and the Sydney entertainment scene in general, with the lockout laws and the restrictions that we've got here in Sydney. So anybody who either resides in Sydney or is interested in what's currently happening in the city at the moment, and the serious issues that we've actually got with the nightlife here, and the laws that are in place, or would like that are trying to be established. My English tonight just sucks at the moment. So we spend quite a bit of time on that and how that impacts, music, and how it impacts the metal scene. We compare it to other cities in Australia. We compare it to other cities overseas, and there's quite a number of perspectives and points that we discuss. And it's certainly a hot topic here in Australia at the moment. And this will be an ongoing theme with a couple of other guests that I have lined up in the weeks and months ahead, where I think this issue in Australia with live music and nightlife and the culture that we have in Australia is certainly a topic that is being discussed at great length at the moment. I think from my part, I should probably do my part by highlighting a little bit of it as well, with certain people that are well connected and are quite knowledgeable from first-hand experiences of what these things and these changes are doing and how they're impacting them. So Anwar and I spend quite a bit of time talking about this, which wasn't planned at all. I actually blame Anwar because I think he actually asked the question to start off with, and then it just went from there. It just went off on a completely different tangent. And the other main topic we talk about is just bands in general and how we moved the spotlight over to our local guys, our Australian artists, and there are a number of Australian bands that are doing quite well, more so than ever before. A lot of fantastic bands that are really getting international recognition and success, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff back at home where there's bands that have the means to be in that same conversation as some of these other bands that are receiving the success, but are dropping the ball in areas where they need to be upping their game and doing a lot of things such as marketing and promoting themselves in the right way and having the right sort of attitude and focus and perspective and whatever. So we spend quite a bit of time on that as well. So all the things that I was going to talk to Anwar about all got discarded. So we'll end up doing another catch up later on down the track and talk a bit more about it, because these are topics that I think I can speak on behalf of Anwar, but we're both pretty passionate about, and I like to have the balance in the podcast by having both music and non-music guests, but a big passion of mine is music, and that's where my head's been for the last 15 odd years, and the industry and bands and musicians and the performing arts and whatnot is something that I've had a lot of exposure to over the years, and is something that I feel passionately about. So every once in a while, these sort of episodes will creep in where we'll have a big rant, and neither of us will be able to rein it in and shut up. So the other thing on the back of this is that I was going to consider breaking this up into part 1 and part 2 just to make it a bit more digestible. But then I thought, why? There's probably no need to. I can make this as long as I want. There's no rules really. You might look at this and think 3 hours is too long. To me, it doesn't mean you have to listen to the one hit. You can listen to it over a few trips to and from work or whatever, however you listen to podcasts. So, especially when these things are released once a week, I'm pretty sure that you'll have sufficient time if you want to keep up to date. If it is too long, then so be it. Just skip the episode and or fast forward at times when something's not interesting to you. But I think the big thing with this podcast is there are no rules. And if we have a lengthy conversation, we have a lengthy conversation. And if any of you guys get something out of it, then it's a bonus. And I really hope that you guys do enjoy it. But I always take criticism along the way and any feedback. So by all means, let me know what you think. I'll have all the show notes and everything in there for our conversation. I'll try and keep them brief and just leave the most sort of pressing points in the show notes because of the length of this episode. But links to Metal Obsession, links to the Wacken Festival, because that's spoken about quite a bit and it's something we refer to quite a bit. Maybe a few articles about the Soundwave Festival, the Legion Festival, the rumours around Download coming to Australia, some of the articles about the lockout laws. There's a couple of really good articles that have been written over the last couple of weeks, and maybe I can find some information that I can post about sort of the local scene as well. So there'll be a bunch of stuff in the show notes for you guys to check out. But get comfortable. Don't have to take it all in one hit. But I really hope you enjoy this episode with Anwar, and we'll speak soon. Cheers, guys. One of the reasons why I wanted to have a chat to you, well, there's actually quite a few reasons, but you've been a part of the music scene here in Australia for quite a number of years, and specifically the metal scene. And there's a lot of, I think you're one of the guys. And I guess if you're a musician in the metal scene, then I think most musicians will know who you are, but probably a lot of other people may not, unless they're frequent readers of Metal Obsession or are connected to you via social media and whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a few things that I'd love to chat about, but I guess to start off with, probably a good little starting point would be with Metal Obsession, because that's probably still the main time-consuming item that you've got at the moment, the thing that you've got most of your focus on. Would that be?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it pretty much takes up, pretty much a whole week every week, because obviously music news is always constant, and you're always reporting on not only local stuff but international. But generally speaking, it's been going good. Obviously, in the last couple of hours, I don't know if you've read, but you've had like this news of potentially Download Festival doing something in Australia, and then AJ Marta wants to do something with, potentially saying he might bring back something, and then we don't know if he has any affiliation with Sonosphere or anything like that, because obviously their name got mentioned, and it's all hearsay at the moment. But everyone's sort of critical of what he says after what happened. But yeah, obviously going back to the question at hand, it's sort of like you're sort of dealing with that sort of stuff and also the local stuff. But with our sort of formula, it's like, well, everyone already knows all that stuff anyway, because you got music feeds and Beat Magazine and the like sort of promoting and reporting on that, but they don't necessarily report on all the local stuff. So that's where we try and sort of dig out those gems of like the new albums or a new single or anything like that, any sort of newsworthy stuff, and then we try and push it as much as we can. But you're sort of essentially pushing a giant boulder up a hill trying to compete with all this other news. But there's been instances where we've promoted a local band throughout this, these phases of, mass hysteria of like, oh, there's a tour coming and all this other sort of stuff. And people still seem generally interested and enthusiastic. Obviously, majority of them are their own fans, but, occasionally you'll get someone that goes, oh, wow, this band's really good, or they sound like insert band here that they're probably fans of or that they really like. And then, they'll sort of essentially just chase after them and see what they sound like, and potentially go to their shows, and then occasionally they'll get new fans or whatnot. But that's pretty much the gist of what we try to do. So
I guess just touching on what you said before about the whole news that's popped up this evening about Download and all the rumours that are floating around and whatnot. I haven't checked to see whether you guys have put anything up with regards to it, because I know that you just mentioned, there's all these other webzines and whatnot that are already covering it. Do you sort of at times look or think that it might be a good idea to sometimes, even though you're repeating news, to have something posted through your own site to try and pull in that attention your way and hope that you can sort of feed off the attention that topic's getting?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously with the Download thing, obviously it came from direct from the source. Obviously the, I don't know what you would call him, pretty much like the general manager or CEO of the Download Festival, but obviously he's a major promoter for Live Nation, which, as you know, have like literally money flying out their asshole. So, when you sort of look at their history and you think, okay, well, if they're interested in doing something in Australia, and they've got like, an unlimited budget, where you think, well, potentially it could happen. But, we do sort of look at that and think, well, okay, we inevitably have to join the bandwagon and think, well, if it's from a reliable source or something, or if we get a press release, then obviously we do it. But if it's sort of just like, like AJ said, just tweeting randomly, it's sort of like, well, it's just like trying to take it with a grain of salt, because at points in his career, he was ultimately honest, and then other times he was a complete, lying bastard. But it's at the end of the day, it's like, well, that's the business. I mean, it's cutthroat, and regardless of what anyone thinks or says, it's like, well, you got millions of dollars you got to deal with, and people pestering you, and bring my favourite band out, and it's like, well, okay, do you have a spare $50,000 or whatever it is that you need to bring them out, because potentially you may like them and, you know, 5 or 6 other people may like them, and then you bring them out and then no one rocks up to their performance. So, but yeah, obviously going back to the question at hand, it's like, yeah, we do deal with that sort of stuff as well. Like, we continually try and push to promote it and sort of join the bandwagon and you know, obviously get those likes or those followers, and hopefully they'll sort of latch on to the local scene as well, or even, you know, even new international stuff, like even the obscure stuff that, you know, all these people are talking about. It's like, well, you know, they could have a new release out and you could have a huge open market and say, well, hey, check this band out. They could be potentially really good for this festival. And, you know, see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've certainly seen with some of the other web zines, not based in Australia, but some of the ones overseas, especially in the US, and maybe it's a bit more of the culture over there, but I see a lot more of, and it sort of touches on what you were saying before with, like, you know, AJ tweets something and suddenly there's a news story out of it. And I see a lot of the articles that come out of some of these US-based metal web zines that it seems to be more of a almost tabloid gossip style, you know, news articles that get released to try and get, you know, that buzz and get the clickbait sort of thing happening to try and draw attention. And I guess depending on how you look at it, it might not be the most authentic way or legitimate way to do it, but maybe in some cases it might be quite smart, because they are drawing a lot of attention. They're getting a lot of people debating and arguing amongst each other, and as a result of that, they're getting a lot more traffic and then hopefully pushing some more legitimate articles. But I guess it comes down to whatever your focus is, or your overall focus is. And I think some people, and you might be in this boat, where you'd probably rather steer towards the more legitimate sources, things that are a bit more confirmed, a bit more clear as far as, you know, announcements and information and news, and not just sort of riding the wind of whatever little whispers are out there and trying to generate some noise just for the sake of getting attention.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously we look at those like US, and I mean, there's a few Australian and European, and I mean, they're pretty much everywhere. They sort of like what you would call the TMZ of metal news. They sort of just scurry, and they're like rats that just chase after anything that they can find. But you know, some of the articles that they release are quite interesting, and others are just like, yeah, I don't care who, like, you know, take for example, like, you know, I don't care what shampoo Corey Taylor uses or whatever else. It's just like, it doesn't really interest me. But for everyone else, it's sort of like, well, you know, they can discuss it or whatever if they want to. But at the end of the day, it just seems like a waste of time. But you know, you think that's more directed towards like their forums or, you know, like personalised fan sort of sites on Facebook and stuff like that. But any sort of publicity is good publicity. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I mean, people are still going to talk about it. So even if a band fucks up, like take for example Vioti's Murder, when they sort of riled up the crowds at Soundwave, was it 2 or 3 years ago? You know, and everyone got on the bandwagon and saying, oh, you know, get them out and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, you know, they obviously apologise and whatever else, and then they're saying, oh, you're all soft cocks and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well...
what do you want?
You know, yeah, what do you want? You want us to be hardcore, and then the next minute you want us to be, you know, bloody Mahatma Gandhi. It's like there's no middle ground. So I think, you know, it's hard to sort of pinpoint what people really want. I mean, obviously they say they want one thing and then they start to read an article. I mean, everyone knows, you know, you put a video up on YouTube or you make a comment and within 5 minutes you'll have some guy or girl, you know, ranting on and saying, oh, you know, you always get this with Metallica. It's like, oh, their best material was in the 80s or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, fair enough. But you do realise music is subjective. It's not like not everyone has the same opinion as you. So, but yeah, look, I mean, it is frustrating at times when you want to sort of, you know, promote something that you think is worthwhile, but then everyone else is sort of just concentrating on, you know, like you said, this tabloid sort of stuff. But
or even, you know, who's better, Metallica or Megadeth? I still can't get my head around how that's still a legitimate debate topic so many years later. And people,
but it works.
It does. It's such a
it
cheap
works,
shot.
and that's the only reason it's still around. It's like, what's better, oranges or apples? And it's like, well, I enjoy both. You know, it's like I enjoy both Metallica and Megadeth, but for everyone else, they sort of have to say, well, I only like one thing, and it's like, well, okay, that's your opinion, but not necessarily the rest of the world has to agree with you. So
it's amazing because the same argument, just it's the same discussion and debate over and over and over again, and a lot of the time it's the same people that jump on to give their 2 cents worth, and it's just a never-ending thing. It's so funny because it's such a cheap shot, but as you said, it works, and as long as people react, and you know, you post a little, you know, comment or a status update or an article or something that focuses on that, and you'll get your thousands of comments, and these inappropriate, out of control arguments on the internet where people are just turning into personal attacks, where people are clicking on people's profiles and going, well, you look like you've got Down syndrome, so what would you know? And then it just gets so ugly, and you're debating over whether loads of the album or not.
There's always like, go, you know, I fucked your mum and all this sort of stuff. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's just music, settle down.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my music, but fuck, you don't have to get so aggressive and ultra.
It's not even over bands that, you know, new bands or bands that haven't been in the limelight before. It's just the same bands over and over. But I mean, I guess these bands they're popular and they're big for a reason, and that's why they're still highly debated, is because they're just that popular. But it's definitely, I think if anyone ever wants to launch a metal webzine and wants to get some quick and easy attention, just start a whole series of Metallica and Megadeth articles and get people talking, because that'll definitely attract at least a certain type of people anyway.
Exactly.
So maybe if you can give me a rundown, just for the people that don't know about Metal Obsession, because you did touch on it and a little bit about what it is. Are you able to just to give a very quick rundown of how long it's been around, the origins of it, the people that are involved with it, and how it's sort of structured and how you manage it? Because, as you said, it's a daily and it's a weekly job in itself, and it's a very difficult, well, not difficult, but very time-consuming to stay on top of it, especially if you're keeping up to date. You guys have got one of the best gig listings, probably one of the only gig listings in the country for metal music. So whenever I have friends that come over from overseas and hit me up and want to know about metal shows, I always refer them to the website, because that's pretty much the most reliable place to check to see what's going on. So even that alone is a big task, and I'm sure there's no doubt a lot of challenges around that. But with the metal news, keeping up to date with reviews and releases and interviews, it's a mammoth job.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, we started probably 9 years ago now. I initially started out as sort of just like a run-of-the-mill editor, but obviously during that time I had a lot of contacts with a few small labels and distributors and stuff like that. So they sort of saw me as a good incentive to have on board. So, but then obviously I sort of shined through and started organising, giveaways and big interviews. Like when I first started, I did a big interview with like David Draymond from Disturbed, and then we did one with like Dave Mustaine, and then we started going on to like Rob Halford and stuff like that, and even going as far as like interviewing Doro Pesh from Warlock or Warlock/Doro. And it essentially just grew from there. And then the original guy that sort of owned the site, he sort of saw it as too much work for him, because obviously he was working 9 to 5, and I guess his intentions are a lot different to what I had and everyone else had. So he sort of thought, well, I'll just move on now, and we said, okay, we'll just essentially just take over the site, and we sort of worked out a deal, and then that was it. And then at that time we had Mitch Booth, who obviously who does a radio station on PBS and runs his own touring company, and obviously is pretty much the owner of the site as well. We sort of conjured up an idea and thought, well, let's just continue on with this and see how it goes. And then we had a few of the existing editors and stuff like that on board, so they said, oh yeah, we'll continue doing it. But then obviously over time, their personal lives sort of came up, or their jobs or family or whatever else, and they sort of had to go. And we said, yeah, fair enough, that's okay. And then we sort of went scouting for new people, and a lot of people put their hands up. And we continually sort of pushed the idea of just concentrating on local music, because at one point we thought, why don't we just sort of concentrate on international stuff? And we all thought, well, everyone else is doing it. This seems like a waste of time. And, obviously the local music is obviously what we want to promote and what we want to push the most. Mm. And then it just it gradually grew from there. And obviously we got more writers on board, and, a plethora of photographers and live reviewers and stuff like that. And it's essentially just grown from that. And, we've been like co-presenters of big tours, and advertised obviously Soundwave when it was still running, and other sort of big tours and stuff. And we've done bits and pieces here and there for other big and small tours as well. Like at one point I sort of arranged something with Sam Dunn, who did Flight 666 and the heavy metal documentaries. And I contacted him when I found out he was coming to Australia with Iron Maiden. I think that was 2006 for the Somewhere Back in Time tour. Mm. And I got in contact with him, and I said, oh, look, I've got this idea. I'm putting this, I guess, pre-show party together. Do you want to come down and have a chat and whatever else? And then I sort of promoted that off my own back, and sort of every night after work I would, put up posts and all this sort of stuff. This is obviously during MySpace years. There was no Facebook or anything like that. Mm. So I gradually just pushed that, and that became a huge success. And I got to meet, obviously, Sam Dunn. We had a really good chat, and obviously I got to be a part of the DVD or the Blu-ray, and then I got to meet Steve Harris and a couple of the other guys after the show, and they were really, really good guys and really relaxed. And after that I thought, well, I really enjoy doing this. So I'd like to do more of it and, get other people involved. And that's essentially what I've done. I mean, I enjoyed sort of the promoting of it and organising all that sort of stuff. And then I gradually sort of got on to, contacting local promoters and, big and small, to see, what sort of tours I had coming up and if they wanted any help. And then we sort of got into the ear of Chris O'Brien, who was working for Soundwave at the time, and, he had a few tours that he wanted us to be a part of, like Hell Yeah and Lamb of God and a couple others as well, and that was really fun to do. And again, it's just sort of blossomed from that, and we've sort of kept the same formula of just, concentrating on local music, but also when we concentrate on the international front, it's more just like when bands tour Australia or, like a new release or something like that. And even so, like nowadays, if, we've got this, I guess you'd call it as a deal with Season of Mist, like they'll give us like the premiere of like a new single or an album stream or a new video clip of one of their bands, and, we'll be one of the first sort of outlets in the world to sort of put it online and sort of promote it through our channel. And
maybe just to interrupt really quickly on that, specifically, I noticed that you guys had the first stream of the Destroy 666 single. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct, yeah.
Because I saw the band actually post the link to Metal Obsession, and I thought, that's awesome. That's great exposure for you guys. and obviously that first point for all their fans to go and click straight there. Are you able to give an indication of what sort of traffic that was able to bring to the site by just doing that, or that particular example itself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it gained quite a lot of momentum after they posted it. We also have the help of the label as well, which Season have missed. And obviously they send out a press release, which obviously gets the attention of all their media outlets in America and Europe and whatnot. So obviously our site is sort of on the top of their list. So, you know, by default, most of them would click on the first link that they see. So, you know, obviously with the Destroyer 666 video clip, obviously that helped, and even the single as well that we premiered, it did extremely well, and even like with interviews as well, like we do sort of you know, big interviews that a lot of other outlets don't necessarily do, and you know, we've had great success with those as well. So, but generally speaking, it's sort of I guess like a team effort. It's not only us, it's the label, and it's also the band as well. So obviously if everyone's working together to push the same thing, then, you know, everyone sort of gets a piece of the pie, like the fans, that is, not us. But obviously we're happy with the result because obviously A, we're getting traffic at our site, and B, we're promoting their product and helping their label get more exposure, and not only them, but the band as well back in Australia. I mean, obviously, a lot of people know Destroyer 666 is initially an Australian band, but then they moved over to, was it the Netherlands, I think?
Yeah, Netherlands.
Yeah. So when they left, everyone's like, oh, okay, that's no more of that then. And then, you know, now that they're sort of back in the limelight, not that they ever left it, but obviously in Europe they're still quite big, but in Australia, everyone's like, well, you know, they're not back yet. Where the hell are they? So hopefully, fingers crossed with this release and all this exposure, potentially we could see, you know, Destroy 666 back in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess things like this and having an Australian site sort of be involved with part of the release would definitely help increase the chances of something like that happening, because it's just definitely going to show, it's going to show the band and the label that the interest is still here in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How many people do you have working? You know, obviously most of the guys are, you know, or probably everybody's probably on a voluntary basis. But how many people do you have as far as contributors and sort of more of the permanent people involved with Metal Obsession?
Well, obviously there's Mitch and myself. We have a young girl named Pratt from India, but she sort of travels around because she's a bit of a vagabond and she goes to a lot of metal festivals and stuff. But we have Jonathan Basenko as well, who's a really good writer. We have a crap ton of photographers. Obviously, we've got Matt Allen and John Raptis and Rebecca Holden and Kerry Greer, and there's a whole lot of good writers as well that do obviously all the local live reviews as well. But I'd say we have about a team of about 20 plus at the moment. Obviously the photographers and the live writers are exceptionally large, but the writers for the site have sort of spread out because obviously everyone's got a day job, and you know, we all sort of distribute the work evenly. It's not like, you know, obviously Mitch and I take care of like the back end of stuff, like, you know, advertising or promotion or publicity and stuff like that. And everyone else sort of just deals with, like, you know, we'll get like an advanced copy of, say, like, you know, the new Dream Theater. They'll give it to us like a week beforehand, and, you know, we'll get to listen to it and add our 2 cents, and then we'll sort of choose a writer that we think is, you know, not only going to give an honest opinion, but also give his own personal opinion as well. It's not going to be like, oh, this is a great album and that's it. It's like, it's a great album, but, you know, because obviously there's always a but. It's like not every album is amazing. So, but obviously at the same time, not every album is a pile of shit. So, music is subjective, so you just got to take it hand in hand, and it's hard to do that when you have one opinion, and then you put the release up, and everyone's like, "Oh, I don't necessarily agree with that," and it's like, "Well, okay, tell us why you don't like that."
Mm.
But going back to what we said before, everyone just usually says, "Oh, it's a pile of shit," and it's like, okay, fair enough. So
it's it can be quite good in a way because any sort of opinion always attracts debates of some sort, and depending on how extreme the opinion is, can definitely ramp up the attention that it has. And I've definitely seen the cheap shots where someone's blatantly made a really short and inappropriate review on a music release, and you can tell they've done it purely to get that attention from the readers that are keeping up to date with the reviews from that particular person or from that publication itself. But one of the questions I was going to have with regards to the writers, and I won't spend too much time on it, but I know that there's a few people that listen who are, I guess, either music journos or people that are hoping to aspire to something like that further on down the track. Do you have a large amount of people that hit you up about contributing to the website, or is it something that you guys struggle to find writers along the way? Like when, as you said before, like people change their priorities, whether it be work, relationships, etc. Their time shifts in a different direction, so they may not be able to contribute as much anymore. So you have to, at points in time, find new people to join the zine to be able to contribute. Is it something that's easy because there's a lot of people out there that are interested, or is it a bit more of a struggle?
It's a bit of both. It's more so a struggle now because, going back to this whole opinionated thing, it's like everyone's very opinionated, and like I've had people sort of approach me and go, I don't necessarily believe that your review of such and such was that great. I believe I can write a better review. And I'm like, okay, we'll give you an opportunity to write something.
Mm.
Would you like to, write a review? We have all these new albums coming out. You're happy to choose whatever you want. We'll give them an opportunity. And 9 times out of 10, they won't even reply back. And it's like, okay, you've said your piece. You said you hated this band and you hate your existence and everything else. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. And then they just go along their day. But outside of that, yeah, it is generally hard to find writers, but good writers. But, I used to write quite a bit. I wasn't no Shakespeare by a long shot, but I tried to be as open and honest and opinionated, or not so much opinionated, but have, what's the word I'm looking for? Just being a bit more, I guess not being so objective.
Maybe a bit more neutral, possibly?
Yeah, just sort of being a bit diplomatic, but also having an opinion, but not sort of ripping their heart out and, shitting on them. So, so obviously I sort of concentrated mainly on the music that I liked, but then I sort of ventured out and I did a bit more like metalcore and hardcore and stuff like that. And then over time, even I started to appreciate that sort of music because I got to be a part of that, I guess, movement or whatever it is. And I started to appreciate more of what they were producing, and and all these bands that were obviously not only established, but all these new bands that were coming out, and like especially the bands in Australia. Like there's so many at the moment. There's more coming out. You got like Northlane and Viard and Colossus and the Version's Crown, and it's like a lot of those have obviously been established for a long time, but a lot of people won't necessarily delve into their history or even their new stuff because they're very obviously opinionated, or they won't, it's not Metallica or it's not from the 80s. So they'll sort of steer away from it and not ever touch it. But I guess at one point I was like that, like everyone else. But then you think, well, if you're not open-minded and if you're not looking at new things, then you're just going to be stuck in this constant loop. It's just boring. And I want to discover new music. I want to discover new bands. And me traveling to say, Varkin, because I've been to Varkin 4 times and a few other metal festivals as well. And I've had the opportunity to see a lot of these bands live, and you think, wow, these guys have something really, they have a strong package, not only in the studio, but then you see them live and you think, holy shit, these guys are fantastic. And there's a lot of bands, like European bands, that I knew their name or I knew who they were, and everyone's sort of talking about them constantly, and you're like, I don't have no idea who they are. But then you sort of see them in Europe and you think, oh, okay, I know what they're talking about. It's just like this whole different experience. And, having, obviously going back to these music festivals that we were talking about earlier, I think having those is a good starting point for a lot of people. Like if, young people want to discover new music, it's like, there's so much online. It's like, fuck, where do I start? But if you have like a festival where you have a bit of metalcore, a bit of, death metal, thrash, power metal, some grindcore or baby metal, then you can pretty much just it's just pretty much a kid in a candy store. You just go ballistic. But even like nowadays, when I sort of like listen to music, there's so much music, and it's like, shit, what do I listen to? And then you've got all this other music that's piling up on your desk, and it's like, I don't know what the hell to listen to anymore. But you still go back to the music that you love, but then you still want to discover new stuff. It's just like it's just like the essence of a good business. You got to have good marketing and a good initiative. And if you don't have either, you're just going to pretty much plummet and fall into the ground. So, and obviously having with all these bands, constantly changing things up and discovering something new, then you essentially got a whole new field of music to discover.
There's definitely at the moment, definitely an unlimited supply of options from a musical standpoint. And I think the great thing about, I guess, metal music specifically, probably more so than other genres, and I'm sure it's a little bit in other genres, but I guess, we can use metal because we're both pretty, well versed in it to a degree. But a lot of listeners are enthusiasts to a degree where many of them will go out of their way to discover new music. They will spend, whether it be 30 seconds or a minute to try and listen to something new that's been posted somewhere. Whereas probably your more casual fans who may only tune into Triple M and love the Black Album and maybe Rain and Blood, and that's about as far as it gets, would not be interested to try something new because they know what they like and that's it. And those people, it's, I guess, for things that, for a website like Metal Obsession, it's great if you can win some of those casual listeners over, but I guess it's not really the key demographic. And it's fortunate that there are a lot of people in the metal world that are really appreciative of music and are always searching for new bands. So there's definitely a large audience that you can still cater for. And then I guess if you do happen to convert a guy who primarily listens to Triple M or Triple J or whatever it might be and nothing else, then that's an additional bonus.
But I mean, I've seen and heard, countless instances where, your typical Triple M listener will go to a show that they've never seen before. Like, take for example when Ghost did Soundwave and then did Sideshow, and there was like, obviously you had the fans that you knew who they were because you mingle with them every week at all the shows and stuff. But then you'd see these people that you'd essentially never see before at shows, and you think, oh, okay, this is really good. There's a bigger audience than you think there is. But then you think, well, are they only listening to it because everyone else is listening to it, or do they generally actually like it, or But you sort of at that point in time, you don't really think about that. You sort of look at the crowd and go, holy shit, there's heaps of people here. This is really good. But then the next tour may happen and it's like there's like 5 people there. So I mean that not only happens with international bands, it happens with local bands as well. But obviously that's a discussion in itself.
Oh, absolutely. We could go off on a tangent for hours talking about the struggles that we have to try and expose music to a broader audience, and your casual weekend warriors and the people that listen to mainstream radio, or I mean, going back to what you said before, I mean, Australia really benefits from the festival format, and we're a small market. We've got a small population in comparison to other parts of the world. And when you've got, as much as people used to hate on Soundwave, and I guess, it's easy to hate on anything really because people just love to lash out just in general. But, as much as people ragged on Soundwave because of the band choices, it still opened up the ears and the eyes to a lot of those weekend warriors who came out to Soundwave because it was advertised, and there might have been a couple of bands on there that are, you know, big popular acts, but, you know, forcibly or not, they've had to stand and endure, you know, some lesser known bands or bands they've never heard of. And there have been people that have just suddenly gone, holy shit, these guys are great, and have become fans due to it. So that festival format, we definitely need it in Australia if we want to increase, you know, original music awareness and people to become more enthusiasts of music. Here, and if we have any chance to have any sort of a market like Europe does, or even just to the US to a degree as well. So it's but yeah, it's definitely a topic in itself. So maybe we'll pen that in for another.
Well, speaking of obviously local stuff, I mean, obviously you being based in Sydney, and after all this hoo-ha of lockouts and stuff, what's your prediction of live music now after that's happened? I mean, regardless if they're going to change it or not, I mean, what do you think is going to happen, or what do you think might happen?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been, it might be a bit harsh, but I think the Sydney scene's been dead for a few years now anyway. You know, there are only a few bands that, I mean, putting international music aside, that, you know, tours that come out, the population's here and the music fans are here, but because apart from a couple of venues that probably aren't in the most convenient of spots for your, you know, your weekend warriors or your people that you know, that travel in from the suburbs, it's there's no options. There's very little options, and for the Australian touring circuit, for metal bands specifically, but for a lot of original music, Sydney is just such a dead spot. And whereas, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago, Sydney was where you would make your money, and then you'd play some of these smaller places in the rural areas, and that would be where you'd barely make even or lose a bit of money, but you would offset it by playing Sydney. Now it's the other way around, where people go to, say, Canberra or even Newcastle, surprisingly, or Wollongong, play there and make more money there, and then use that to offset the Sydney date, because they still feel that they should be putting a Sydney date there just because it fills up the tour. More of a necessity more than a want to go there and play, because it just, you know, you have to tick off the capital city. So it's been struggling for a long time, and we've had, you know, the pokies come in. We've had noise restrictions where local residents have, you know, high rises have been built around old established venues, and for whatever ridiculous reason, they seem to have more rights than venues that have been there for years beforehand. I know Melbourne's had that problem, but have had a lot of success after the fact with it. But that killed off a lot of great venues in Sydney. We had a lot of foreign investors that just bought venues out and turned them into swanky bars or apartment complexes. So
yeah, don't worry, we had that with the Palace in Melbourne. So yeah. I feel your I feel your hatred.
And it's hard because, I mean, you know, then you look back at the people that own the place in the first place, and then you don't know the reasons as to why they sold. But I guess in the end, the dollars do the talking more so than the romantic vision of keeping a music scene alive, especially if people are trying to make ends meet and put bread on the table, so to speak. And if they get a great offer for prime real estate, especially in the CBD in Sydney, and, you know, real estate in Sydney is just crazy. The boom over the last few years has just been out of control. A lot of people can't even afford to live in Sydney. So if you own property, especially commercial property in Sydney, over the last several years, you'd be stupid not to sell up, because you could just completely cash in, and a lot of people freak out because there's going to be a bubble in the economy and all the prices will crash. So I think a lot of people that did own these pubs and venues just went, you know what, let's cash in while I still can before the whole thing bursts, and let's get out. And unfortunately, a lot of foreign investors come in and say, well, there's prime real estate, it's right smack bang in the city, I'm cashed up, let's turn it into something that's going to attract a different demographic, and not understand the potential revenue that live music can bring in. But from a restaurant or swanky bar perspective, or even apartments, I guess there's probably more money long term in those sort of establishments. But that's been a big thing. But now the lockouts have taken it to another level. It's not just the fact that you can't serve drinks after a certain time, or people get kicked out of a certain time. Because I used to have that argument where I'd say, well, most gigs finish at
12 or 1 or
12 or 1 at the most. So, what's everyone complaining about? But then you have to think from a business sense with these venues that a lot of them are operating later because they need to be able to bring the revenue in to keep the live element of the venue alive. And, the problem with a lot of these venues is if they want to keep trading after a certain time, then there are certain things that need to be in place, where it's surveillance, security, additional licenses. I think I could be wrong, but I think taxes and things like that start to go up after a certain time. So the costs just skyrocket, and a lot of venues turn around and go, you know what, we can't survive. We have to close our doors. Or people go, you know what, the live side of things is not feasible. Let's ditch that. Let's put a DJ in there, or let's turn into a pokey room, and it might be an easy way out, but in the end, it's a business, and it might not be the most moralistic avenue to go down, but in the end, it's money. So I think moving forward now, it's not going to make it any easier, and unless the government here turn around and listen to the backlash that they're getting at the moment, because they're getting quite a bit in the media, and it's not just coming from just punters. The media seems to be jumping on board as well, and there's a lot of conflict of interest with the casino that's being built here as well. And anyway, I'll go off on a tangent on that, but hopefully that would result in maybe some backpedaling a little bit. I don't think it'll happen, but who knows? I mean, people have got to make a stand and make some noise and hope that things get better. Or it might be a change of government later on down the track, and that might be their calling card to win votes, that they'll relax the laws a bit and let more opportunities for entertainers and bring the entertainment precinct back to Sydney. But at the moment, it's not a good place at all. And I'm actually going to get a few people onto the podcast over the coming months just to talk about it. People that are running venues and are booking bands for venues in Sydney, and get a bit of their insight as well.
Because I sort of see it as like, I mean, they're sort of undermining, their key demographic by obviously having these lockouts and everything else. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, well, you're going to make more money off, enthusiastic young people that want to have a good time and want to watch a show and stuff like that, than sort of having some, say for example, some snooty couple going to a restaurant and they'll go out for dinner maybe once or twice in the span of 6 months. But obviously, you're competing with obviously everyone else as well. But you sort of think, well, you're still making money anyway. But then what's going to happen with, say for example, well, what are people going to do on New Year's Eve? What if Sydney has if they even have another Olympics or something like that? And it's like, well, what are people supposed to do after hours? It's like, if they want to unwind or have a good time, and you sort of think, well, you've pretty much just locked everything up, and they're pretty much just forced to go home and just look at a wall and get pissed and try and use their imagination to have a good time or whatever. But
absolutely, it's really difficult. And it's funny because I have a lot of friends from overseas who make plans to come to Australia to visit and travel around and whatnot, and they ask me about Sydney. And as much as this is going to be a thorn in the side from anyone listening from Sydney, a lot of the times I say, come here for the tourist attractions, come and see the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge and, I don't know, whatever else we've got, the beaches and whatnot. But apart from that, if you have to pick a city, then go to Melbourne or even go to Brisbane. Go and visit some of these other places that have got a little bit more of a night culture associated with it. I mean, Brisbane struggles a lot with their laws, but even from my experience, they seem to be at least holding it together a little bit better than what Sydney has. So it's a very difficult thing, and I think I I think people have to look at it from two different perspectives. You can look at it purely from a business point of view, and maybe the live music for a lot of people in business is not an attractive thing, and probably haven't been exposed to it, don't understand it. But you also need to provide things for young people as well, and you need to be able to give people an excuse to go out there and socialise with people. And it's not about alcohol, it's not about violence. And this guy from the I can't remember the guy's name, who made this statement that, you know, since the lockouts, crime's reduced by such and such percent. But what most people didn't touch on is that the crime rate's been going down for the last decade at the same rate. So it was going down anyway. And, you know, people are getting more educated. There's less dickheads out there. More people are understanding to respect each other. And you're always going to get dickheads no matter what. But it's going down regardless, and it hasn't been due to the lockout laws. And
because I mean, even sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, I was ever going to say, like, even with Melbourne, you know, we've had instances where, you know, venues have been shut down completely, but then you have other venues that are sort of, they hold their ground. And take, for example, like Cherry Bar, you know, down the road from where they are, they had a huge high-rise going up, which was all apartments. And obviously the owner's like, well, okay, I've still got to have a business running, so I'll follow procedures and put in sound proofing and all that sort of jazz. But then, you know, these residents that are coming in, they think, well, I've paid X amount of money for this property, so I want everything around me to be like ultra, just everything needs to be like stop at this specific time and everyone needs to be quiet. And it's like, well, you do realise you live in the city. It's like 90% of the noise is from cars and people yelling and screaming and loud music and everything else. It's like, even if you stop one thing, you're still going to hear numerous other things around you. But obviously, if you've got people in a safe environment where they can go have a good time and, you know, drink to their heart's content and obviously leave when they want to, then I think that's a lot better than not that this would happen, like have people just go around yelling and screaming and throwing bottles at houses and, you know, it's not like the Bronx or something. It's just like, well, it's just a logical thing to make. But like you said, like there's the residents need to think about the business, but also the business needs to think about the residents. But a lot of times the business sort of think 5 steps ahead and think, okay, we need to have soundproofing. We need to, you know, figure out when we need to stop and all this other stuff. But then the residents are just like, oh, that's not good enough. And it's like, well, you've got to make some sort of, you know, some sort of agreement with this whole situation where everyone can get along. It's not like you have the right to say something because, you know, you spent so much money on a house or whatever. It's like, if you don't want noise, go live in the country. But, you know, it's, yeah, it is a difficult subject, but like you said, it's, obviously meant for another day and probably more professional people, because I've got a lot of opinions, but I'm not right by a long shot. So
yeah, I mean, but then again, I mean, I think people, you know, there will be people in the hot seat that are well educated on the topic, and that's fine. But I think the people who aren't as well versed still need to have a voice, because in the end, it's impacting everybody. And while you might not have all the facts, I think it's still probably a good idea for people to talk about it, because you know, I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we can see multiple sides, and we see a side from musicians and also punters, and we certainly are music fans, and we like to go out and see live music. We like to go to a bar. We like to talk to people that are like-minded and have some drinks and have a good time. And, you know, that's obviously something that impacts on us. So I think it's still good to have an opinion and talk about it. And I guess, you know, I mean, I think it's going to be a long-term thing, and I think Sydney will eventually bounce back and someone will wake up to it. But I think it might get to a point where we really, really hit rock bottom and we get to critical mass before things start to change. And I don't think we're quite there. We're getting very close, but I think it could sink a little bit lower before it gets better. And it's just going to it's like anything. People just let things go and waits until, you know, there's huge conflict and there's a huge problem that eventuates before someone turns around. And it might even be just a change of government that, as I said before, you know, then the opposition turns around and says, you know what, I know a way that I'm going to win votes here, and it might be a really easy way, and I'm going to promise this, and I'm going to change this, and that's enough to get them getting the popular vote, and hopefully then they keep their word. But I mean, that's another story.
Well, a lot of people forget that they have more power than any politician. I mean, obviously they bring these supposed leaders into power, so they can essentially take them out if they want to. But obviously, if you just disagree with everything that they said, you just have a revolving door of politicians. But if you had like a logical argument or debate that you said, okay, well, if we're paying our taxes and doing all this sort of stuff, then, give us a bit of freedom to do what we want and, let us go and have a good time, and we'll go home and go to bed and go back to work the next day. And if we have a hangover, it's over. That's our responsibility and whatever. But, obviously with these politicians, I think they're still, their minds set in like the 1940s, and it's like, well, times have changed. It's like we live in a digital age. Everything's a lot quicker now, but at the same time, people still want to relax and have a good time. You can't just expect everyone to stop what they're doing because, a few disgruntled politicians have a bone to pick with, some metalheads or teeny boppers or punks or, people that go out and listen to techno or whatever it is. It's like, everyone's entitled to have a good time. It doesn't matter what you listen to.
Well, I think it'll come down to the economy itself, and I think that's why the media in Sydney, at least, have really sort of jumped on board now, because it's not just impacting the live music scene, but it's also impacting, restaurants. It's impacting some of these smaller bars. It's even impacting kebab shops and late night food joints, which is quite funny. But I think people are starting to see now that the city's actually dying. I mean, I walk through the city some nights, and it's just dead. And you just think we're in the biggest city in the country and such a world famous city. And there's no one around, and there's nobody around, and I'm dead smack bang in the city where there should be action, there should be noise, there should be people walking around, and it's just, I mean, we've pushed people into shopping centres and we built some big shopping areas in the city itself, but the shops are only open till a certain time, and once they're closed, you've got a few bars, but for the most part they're struggling to stay open any later than probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and unfortunately, as you said, politicians might be stuck in their old ways, different generation, and most of them are in bed by 9:30 at night, and they don't understand the concept of going out or starting your night at 11:30 at night. But unfortunately for them, there's a lot of people from different walks of life, a lot of people that are shift workers, a lot of people that work in hospitality, a lot of people that knock off late at night or in the early hours of the morning and want to socialise. They want to have a couple of quiet drinks with some co-workers, or just want to go out and have a great night or early morning. And a lot of cities in Europe can master it. There's a lot of cities across the world that can do it. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect that Sydney can just change to something like that overnight. But we're not doing ourselves any favours to even make an attempt to try and accommodate as many people as possible. We've got one view of how people should live, from the viewpoint of a few old farts, basically, and it works for them, and so it should work for everybody else. And it's because there was a really good article. I forgot who posted it, but we made a mention about it on the site. Some guy wrote a huge article about the impact of what would happen. And he essentially said the same thing as you, where it's like, obviously, take, for example, like a kebab shop, like they may do, some good business through the week, but their best business would be after hours when everyone's stumbling out of, whether it be a concert or a dance night or whatever, and they would make triple of what they would make in one day just by, doing what they usually do, but obviously their demographic is expanded tenfold because everyone's out there having a good time. They're pissed off their face, but they want to have something to eat because they're starving. Yeah.
But it not only affects, like you said, it affects everyone. It's like everyone's linking each other. So, but once the venues are gone, you're going to have restaurants going down. And I mean, I even saw photos of some of the areas where it just looks like a ghost town. And I remember this when because I went to Sydney to go see Judas Priest at the Enmore.
Yep.
And after the show, you come outside and you think everyone's just like scattered away. It's like, you know, it's like you turn the light on and all the cockroaches just run under the table, and it's like, fuck, where did everyone go?
Yeah.
And then you sort of drive back into town, because I went to Frankie's Pizza.
Yep.
And obviously that's sort of like, I guess, Sydney's version of Cherry Bar, or you know, the like. And everyone obviously was hanging out there, but outside was just literally a ghost town. It was just, you could smash a window and no one would fucking say anything. It's like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. And obviously, I guess that was my first experience, because, you know, I have been to Sydney quite a few times, but that was in the past. But to go see a show and then obviously finish that late, I think it finished up, I think you were there too.
Yeah.
I think it finished up, was it like midnight or something like that? And then everyone sort of stayed around for about 5 or 10 minutes, have a chat and sort of, you know, discuss the show and what their pick of the night was and all that sort of stuff. And then everyone was out of there. And then, yeah, and oddly enough, I went to the kebab shop up the road and had something to eat, and then came back, and then it's like, shit, where's everyone gone? So, but yeah, I can understand the frustration of, because I mean, obviously having such a broad range of venues in Melbourne, and having, you know, extended licenses, and not only that, we now have the added bonus of having 24-hour public transport on the weekend. So even if you come out at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you can just go to the train station, obviously excluding some trains like out to the country or whatever. You can still get home, and then, you know, you'd be right. Or you can, you know, you obviously get on a bus if you want to, or you can cab it or whatever else like that. But it's just, I'm so used to that if I were to move to Sydney, I'd probably lose my mind. I can understand how difficult it is for people to go through that, because, you know, sometimes being in that situation where you have all these options and, you know, numerous shows to go to, you're a bit spoilt for choice, and you sort of take advantage of it at times. But then you think, well, shit, Sydney has nothing, and it seems like the further you get away from Melbourne or Victoria, it's like you look at Adelaide, and Perth still has a reasonably good live scene, and Adelaide has bits and pieces here and there, but generally speaking, it's like you look at Melbourne compared to everyone else, and it's I'm not like, you know, comparing them and saying we're better or anything, but you just think, well, is it the political views? Is it the economy? Is it the infrastructure? And you think, well, it's a bit of everything. It's not just, you know,
and it's not just about. I was just going to say, it's not just about, you know, live music or an appreciation of music or anything like that. Melbourne's got a culture that's around, you know, going out at night, and whether it be, you know, your restaurant precincts, Lygon Street, and all these areas that are just fantastic, just restaurant after restaurant. It's very much embraced that multicultural vibe in the inner city, whereas in Sydney you do have a little bit of that, but majority of the focus is in the western suburbs, and then you've got all the stereotypes and connotations that are associated with, you know, out in the suburbs, and all the problems around, you know, racial tension and etc. So it's not viewed as such a positive thing, whereas Melbourne's embraced it and really highlighted it. And then you know, the big thing that I used to discover, and, you know, I've lost count of how many times I go to Melbourne, but the first few times I went down, I was just blown away that people would be at home until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night with their friends, and, you know, they might have something to drink or whatever, and then they go out at about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I couldn't get my head around it, because to me, I'd be out at 6 p.m. and I'd be out until, I don't know, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, but everyone's night seemed to really kick off at, you know, closer to midnight, and or people would be at a restaurant until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then go out. And it's just this real openness to, you know, there's no limitation, and nothing's frowned upon. You can start your night at midnight. You can start your night at 6 p.m. whatever you want, and the city embraces it. And whether that's been, you know, a heavy focus from a political point of view, and obviously that's got a large part to play, and then obviously now you guys have upped the ante with the transport and be able to provide that 24-hour option. You know, that's nowhere else in in the country. And it's quite funny because I was living in Brisbane, and just as I was moving from Brisbane to Sydney, the first lockout laws started to come into Brisbane, and all venues were shutting down at 3 a.m. And I think you weren't allowed into a new venue. You were locked in at 1:30. So very similar to, I think, what they're trying to do in Sydney, from what I understand. But there was no public transport running at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it was just completely retarded and not thought through. So what you had was, at 3 o'clock, all these bars were shutting down and kicking everyone out, saying, that's it, no more. We can't serve you. It's against the law. Cops are walking around. And then you've got thousands of people out in the street, all fighting for taxi ranks and all trying to get home. And then people that can't get home, everyone's starting to sober up. Everyone's starting to get tired. People are getting grumpy. People are wasted. And that's when the tension starts. So that's when your violence kicks in. People start mouthing off at each other. People get frustrated. All the fights kick in, and it just got out of control. And I think I'm not up to speed with where Brisbane is with their the lockouts are still there, but I think they may have ramped up their public transport a little bit more. It's not 24 hours, but I think it is a lot more. It makes a lot more sense than what it used to be. But that was just an example of where there's this knee-jerk reaction to try and stop violence and probably make a lot of people from an older generation happy, the people that are probably dedicated voters, and putting a Band-Aid fix on it to show that they're trying to do something, but not thinking it through and going, oh, well, what's the impact of this? It's like when they increased the taxes on spirits and premixed spirits, and trying to avoid, teenage alcohol intake. And so trying to make it more expensive for people to get their Bacardi Breezes or their Jim Beam premixes or whatever. But what did the kids do? They just went and bought a bottle of it instead of the premixes and
Box of Goon.
Yeah. Or they went, or lots of people just went to the Goon bag. In the end,
put on the washing line and swing it around.
That's it. Goon of fortune. Goon of fortune. But in the end, there was. As soon as you tell people they can't do something, they'll find a way. They'll find a way to break through it. And the more you oppress somebody, the more they break out. And it's just an old way of thinking, and it's probably going to take another generation or so to really sort of open up their thinking and be a lot more sort of in tune with the general public. And we still live in a society, unfortunately, in a lot of areas where it's just we're still stuck in old tradition and old ways and old views. And we're not moving quick enough, unfortunately. But and I think as long as people, the good thing about social media, and I think a lot of people, the newer generation are starting to get to an age where they have a lot more of a voice. They're becoming a bit more legitimate in the public domain, where a lot of people are becoming journalists. They're working in the media, and these are people that have gone through those stages where they can see the things that haven't worked and have got a bit more of a voice, and they're voicing for people of a younger generation now, whereas, probably, 10, 15 years ago, those people were still in school, and the people that were enforcing these laws were people from the previous generation that didn't care. So I think we'll start to see, and I've definitely noticed it in the last couple of weeks with what's happening in Sydney, that a lot more of the press are starting to jump on board and argue the points and the just decisions that have been made by the government here. So hopefully that'll just be a trend, especially with social media, and a lot more people will start to voice their opinion, and hopefully it'll be enough to at least start to sway it in a more positive direction.
Well, I mean, that even happened to Melbourne at one point. I mean, we had lockout laws at, I think it was like 2 a.m. or something. And you either had to stay in the venue till closed or till morning or whatever, or once you leave, you left. But then, local government and all these venues realised, well, there's just a congestion of transport and everything else. And then they sort of looked at each other and thought, well, okay, that was a shit idea. They took it on the chin and then sort of took the lockout laws out. And you think, well, okay, if it works for one state, it obviously will logically work for another. It's like, but like you said, it's I think with, especially in Melbourne or in Victoria, we have a bit more of an open mind with politics. I mean, there's a lot of sort of you know, you have like the Greens and even like, you know, there's good people in both Liberal and Labor. I mean, it's not, you know, they're all shit or whatever, but, you know, obviously having a younger voice to sort of explain the situation is a good thing, because at some point this generation of old ways is obviously going to die out, and then the new generation will come in and sort of think, well, okay, let's change things up a bit. But I think the best thing to sort of think about is like, well, this isn't going to last forever. It's either they'll sort of change their opinions quick smart if, you know, if their votes are going to be in jeopardy, or someone will come along and say, hey, I've got a really good idea, let's just do this instead, and sort of make everyone happy. But, you know, who knows? I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, I can understand the you know, the frustration that not only you but everyone else in Sydney goes through. And like you said, this isn't a music thing or whatever. It's metal and whatever. It's like, you know, it's nothing like that. It's just like, well, everyone's entitled to have a good time and to go out. I mean, everyone works hard and at the same time they want to play hard as well. But I mean, you look at take for example, like when I go to Germany, like you'll go to Hamburg and that's sort of like their party capital or city, and you'd go out and you'd have the Ripperbahn and, you know, sort of like the red light district, and then you'd have all the bars and clubs and everything else, and you got everything at your heart's content, and you can, you know, go throw your money away at all the casinos or whatever else you want. But then, you know, you go to Munich and like the whole city closes at like 10 o'clock, and you can sort of walk around and, you know, there's still people sort of walking around and stuff, but, you know, it happens not only in Sydney or Melbourne, it happens everywhere else. But obviously, I guess with Munich, it's a very, you know, there's still the old generation in that area of Germany. But then you look at Hamburg, and it's a very young and I guess hip sort of place to be. So, but generally speaking, I mean, I don't know what they sort of did from a political point of view to sort of make everyone happy, but obviously if someone has a voice, then obviously they should use it to, you know, obviously tell these politicians or these groups or whatever to obviously express how they feel.
I think probably the big thing, and it's probably a near impossible task for most people, because most people aren't programmed in this way, but because there's so many different people from different walks of life, everyone has their own agenda. Everyone has their preference, whatever topic it may be. Everyone's got their own opinion and their own view of how life should be, and how you should interact with each other, how you should spend your pastime, what sort of work you should do, what you should do to contribute to society in general. And the problem is that everybody's answers are going to be different all the time. And you know, you could, to make it really simple, in this example, we could say two sides of the fence. You've got the people that aren't interested in the nightlife, don't see any benefit of it whatsoever, see it as all just negative connections, whether it be violence and, you know, alcoholism and young people, you know, wasting their lives, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got the other side, and the people who are all for it and find the benefits of going out and having the social aspect and being able to enjoy themselves and you know, let themselves go in a way just to relieve some tension and whatnot. But I think the big thing that probably both sides tend to probably fault on is that no one's actually thinking of the other party. So they're not actually trying, and there are some people, but I think for the majority, no one's sitting back and going, you know what, I can understand where the other side's coming from. I can understand why those people think the way that they do. And I think to try and keep it simplified, for people probably on our side that are very much in favour of having cities open, in even to a 24-hour standpoint, to be able to cater for everybody, is that you need to then be able to educate the people who don't agree with it as to what the benefits to them are. And the benefits to them are, and you need to speak their language, is going to be the economy. It's going to bring more money in. It's going to bring more dollars that are going to be injected into things such as infrastructure in the city, things that are going to eventually filter into your local area, your community. You might not live in the city, you might live in the outer suburbs of Sydney, but eventually that money will filter back out in various ways. It might be that you've got a more robust transport system that's going to help you commute during the week, and make, no delays coming home, and no, track work that's going to cause all sorts of issues. It could mean that you've got a better police presence because you can employ more police. It could be better ambulance services, better hospitals, and all sorts of things. And I think as soon as you start talking in that language to people that are so opposed to those views, then you've probably got a better chance of winning people over. You still might be fighting a never-ending battle, but I think for a lot of people, and I mean, I can only speak from this point of view because that's the side that I sit on, that I think probably more people need to reach out, and whether that be through social media or through journalism or anyone who's definitely got a public voice, and to explain to the people that are set in their ways in the older generation and say, you know what, you might not understand it, you might not agree with it, it might not be something that interests you, but here are the things that are going to be a benefit. These are the things that are going to make life better for you and better for your children later on down the track. And if you allow this, then it's going to bring more money in. It's going to bring a better economy. It's going to bring more tourism. It's going to put the city back on the world map in the right ways. And yes, there are always problems associated with it, but there's problems associated with either way you go. You shut down the whole city, there's going to be problems there. You keep the city open, there's going to be problems there. It's what you do and how you mitigate the problems. But that's probably a big thing. I think we always worry about ourselves and the injustice that we experience, but probably not trying to think, well, how do we change it that's going to make it better for the other side as well, and make them sort of understand where we sit. So, and you'd expect that from their point of view, they try, or at least attempt to try and explain their side. But I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely going to be biased, but I think they probably don't have a very good argument overall with their particular side of the fence.
Well, I mean, obviously you're right about, looking at it from both perspectives. I mean, I guess you'd call him like a motivational speaker or a spiritual whatever. It's a guy named Judy Krishnamurti, and he has a lot of talks. Obviously, he's passed away now, but when he did a lot of talks, he talked to universities, and he had his own sort of lectures and stuff that he'd do, and he'd talk about like fear and love and all this other sort of stuff. And his understanding of fear was essentially what you said. It's like everyone has their own perception of what they need to be afraid of or what they think they're afraid of. But when they sort of look at it from, bottom line, no labels, no nothing, this is a human problem, not like, an Anglo-Saxon problem or, a middle-class problem or whatever it is. It's like, it's a problem that affects literally everyone. And obviously everyone's either socially conditioned or psychologically conditioned from birth to believe one thing, and then they grow up and then that's what they believe. And then when someone sort of questions them, like take, for example, like religion or politics or any sort of social views, then they'll sort of snap at them and say, well, hey, that's not right. This is what I believe. And it's like, well, okay, fair enough. But then, all you have is this bickering and arguing, complaining. And it's like, well, that's pretty much what's happened in the last, several thousands of years of wars and stuff. It's just like everyone's just complaining and arguing over the same stuff, and they're not looking at it from a broader perspective. And that's essentially all it is. It's just like they're conditioned by this one group of people, or this certain, political, I'm not going to say, reptilian overlords or some bullshit like that. It's just like, it's a human problem. And obviously, but people use these outside influences like, it's the boogeyman, they're going to destroy us and we should do this. And it's like, no, it's just some human beings are just complete and utter fucking assholes. They just need to be taught or reassured that, you don't need to do this to survive in life. You can be who you want to be and have some fun and stuff, but just don't be a complete asshole to everyone.
Oh, absolutely. But I think people are just, in a general sense, I think people invest far too much energy worrying about what other people are doing and worrying about people that don't agree with what they believe in, or, whether that be religion or a political view or, their own personal interests or passions or anything like that. And I see it every day. I see it with people I work with, or people within the music industry, or anything. This all these sort of every area, and people are always fixated on what other people think of themselves, or what other people are doing, even if it has no impact whatsoever. I mean, you see it on social media. Everyone's out to try and tell someone else that they're wrong, or that they should be thinking a particular way. And if you go back to, the topic of violence and alcohol and some of these big apparent reasons why the government's clamped down on these sort of and put these laws in place, you've got the general public, and you've got the Anglo-Saxon middle-class family out in the suburbs who's concerned about their child being out in the streets and getting hit by some other out-of-control drunken hooligan. Then instead of worrying about what may or may not happen, maybe having a look back between your own four walls and going, well, hang on, is there something that I can do to educate my own child of what's responsible drinking, responsible socializing, etc., etc. Not oppressing your child, but educating them. And then also looking, well, okay, I've done my part as far as looking after my child. What else can I do to have an impact in my community, to educate other people that there are better ways to interact with one another and to respect other people's views? And that might be, doing things within the local school system. There might be something that's the local council or the government or anything. There's so many community projects and whatnot, but people, unfortunately, that requires effort. And most people, it's easier to lash out and tell other people that they're wrong and that they should change, instead of going, what can I actually do to make a positive change myself, instead of just telling other people that they're doing something wrong. And that goes back to religion, it goes back to politics, it's everything. If you believe in something and it means so much to you, then you should be doing whatever you can to make sure that you're the best person that you possibly can be, and you set the example of why you think this is, you believe what you believe. And if it's genuine and you're doing it the right way, then people will either jump on board or they won't. But in the end, you've got to have that peace of mind to know that you believe in a particular right, but other people are going to have a difference of opinion, and you have to accept it. But that's not human nature. It goes against typical human nature.
But obviously, looking back at sounds like me mentioning Germany again. It sounds like I have a love affair with that place. But obviously, when you go to Germany and stuff, obviously they don't sort of hide the fact that Hitler existed or whatever else. It's like they sort of teach the younger generation, okay, this stuff happened. Let's not let it happen again. And they sort of educate them and say, okay, this is what happened. This is what really happened. All these people died and suffered. Obviously, looking at it from an open mind or an open perspective, what do you think should happen? And obviously, no doubt, majority of them would say, okay, this is fucking monstrous. Why would anyone do this? But it gives the person an opportunity to think, well, okay, I know this is wrong. It doesn't need to happen again. But then it branches out, and even at music festivals like Wacken Open Air, they have an incentive or whatever, sort of what you call it, where it's called Metalheads Against Racism, and it's essentially just like a group of people that sort of watch out for each other. But even if there's any sort of remote sign of racism in the campgrounds, like blatant, anti-Semitism or anything of the sort, you pretty much just booted out of the festival, and they just said, well, we don't want to have your bullshit views in here. Piss off. And that's pretty much how they work it. It's just blunt force sort of, we've already told you, we've already given you a warning ahead of time and all this sort of stuff. These rules are pretty simple. It's like, I'm sure it'd be the same if, taken from the person dishing out the racist comments or whatever, if they were teased or whatever, they would feel exactly the same way. So you're essentially just shaming them and saying, well, you can't have any of this fun, so we're going to kick you out. We're not going to give you a refund or whatever, because you already know that we don't agree with these viewpoints. And obviously a lot of other music festivals in Germany have the same thing as well. Like, they don't have any time for racism or anything like that. And I think that's another thing that needs to even happen here. Like, essentially they could have done that at Soundwave, because that was essentially a multicultural festival in itself. I mean, obviously not only with the bands, but you have even when like Iron Maiden toured, like I saw an influx of Indonesians and Indians and stuff like that.
Yep.
And you want to welcome them because obviously you want them to come back. And it's like, that's a key demographic that you want to come back and spend money in your own country, but also influence these festivals to get bigger and bigger. Because you think, well, if you look at these festivals in Europe, it's like, yeah, okay, majority of them are from, Sweden, from Switzerland, from Germany, from the Netherlands, wherever. But you've still got a huge influx from Japan, from India, from Mexico, generally South America, Australia. So you want to welcome these people, and that's something that I noticed straight away when I went to Varken for the first time. Like I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any intentions of like traveling with anyone because I thought I'll go by myself and see how it is, because I was sort of there as like quote unquote a reporter, but at the same time I still wanted to have a good time and meet people and stuff like that. And you think, being at a festival with some, 70,000 plus people, everyone's just doing their own thing and, you'd sort of be lost in a sea of people. But as soon as you arrive, everyone just wants to have a drink with you. Everyone wants to have fun. They come up to you and talk to you and they say, oh, wow, you came from Australia. That's crazy. And, they'll take out, time from their own, good time to have fun with you as well. And when all the music's done and dusted and you're sort of sitting down at like 3:00 in the morning having a beer or whatever, you can sort of talk a bit more openly with them about politics and stuff because, they've all sort of gone to school and, done their studies and whatever else. But even the ones that don't, they still have, they still have really good jobs and whatever else. And there was actually one guy that I met. I was watching Megadeth. Was it 2011? And 2014. And we started talking, and I said, what do you do as a job? And he said, I'm some IT consultant or whatever it was. And he was sort of saying, how the Germans obviously work hard, but at the same time they play hard. But they once the good times are over, they just go back to work and they're very efficient and, they do their job and whatever else. But then okay, we can party, when we'll have our next holidays and all that sort of stuff. But obviously that's been a social integration over a long period of time, much like, the appreciation or the acceptance of heavy metal. It's like you go to Germany and, heavy metal's in the mainstream and you can turn on the radio and hear you can hear anything from Avantasia to bloody Cannibal Corpse, and it's, there's a huge variety of music. It's not like here where you turn on Triple M and occasionally you might hear, one of the obscure songs from Megadeth or Metallica, and then they'll go back to playing, Foo Fighters and all the other sort of stuff. So it's a lot more broad and open because there's that transition over time. And I'm sure that will happen here over time. And obviously we're still a young country. We still have a lot of growing up to do. But, when I sort of compare, Europeans to Australians, it's like from the metalhead point of view, they're sort of very similar because they're very open, they're very caring, they're understanding. Obviously, I know this because I've experienced it, but from everyone from the outside point of view, say from a politician or a disgruntled mother or something, they'll just be like, oh, it's all loud noise and devil worshipping and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, if you took the time to actually discover these bands and educate yourself, it's like, yeah, okay, some of them do sing about Satanism and whatever else. You think, okay, why are they singing about it? It's like they may be, they may be sick of their, these religious views pushed upon them, and they're looking for another source to show their frustration or whatever else. But then you have other bands like, take for example, like Halloween or Gamma Ray, like Gamma Ray more so. It's like most of their songs are about positive and being happy and all this sort of stuff, and essentially just like what Kai Hansen sees as like the metal way of life is like going out and having a good time and socializing and taking care of your friends and pursuing your dreams and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, it's like it's a very broad range of music. It's not just blast beats and satanic lyrics all the time. It's quite varied and very open. So, but obviously going back to the social thing of it, I think, Australia's getting there, obviously, but it's, from my point of view, it's taken a bit longer than expected. But, you can't rush everything because it won't work, obviously. You just got to take time and let everyone understand and, slowly but surely we'll get there. But to say when, who the fuck knows? It could be 50 years from now, it could be 2 years from now. But, you know, like you said, if everyone sort of gets together and shares their ideas and is very open-minded and obviously shares their opinions and essentially just has a bit more of an open perspective of the whole situation, not be completely one-sided all the time, then obviously you're gonna be on the winning side of this never-ending battle. So, but
it's
yeah, I mean, it's.
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, you nailed it on the head, and I mean, we'll stick with Germany because you obviously are in love with Germany. But it's a good example because it's exactly what I said before about thinking about the people that are opposed to it and thinking about the people that don't understand it and don't see the benefits of it. And
how much have we veered off?
I was going to touch on how much of a tangent we've gone on, but that's okay. I've written out a whole list of things that we're going to talk about, and I haven't touched any of them. But it's okay.
Is this going to be like a 6-hour interview or something?
No, I'm going to have to go to the toilet soon. So.
Okay.
We'll come back for a part 2 and part 3 and part 4. We'll make it a more regular thing.
Yeah.
But maybe I won't ramble on too much longer, but just to
I don't care. I can yap all night. I don't give a shit.
just to tie it back into what I said before, the great thing, and I've seen this. So I haven't been to Wacken itself, but I was in Itzehoe just before Wacken started. We just did a small little club show there a few days before Wacken, and
was that at a Hamburg ballroom?
No, I can't remember the name of this place off the top of my head. It was tiny. It was so small. But we saw, it was quite funny, and I'd seen it on a couple of the Wacken DVDs, but we were walking down the street and there was an elderly couple that walked past us. And, you know, there was probably 5 or 6 of us in the group. We all had the black T-shirts on. We had our hair out. We were walking around with cans of beer in our hands. And probably if you saw that in Australia and you had a similar elderly couple walking towards you...
I'm offended!
Well, if they've got the balls, they'll say something. Otherwise, most of them will walk to the other side of the road and try and look at the path and look away out of fear that we're going to glass them or yell at them and abuse them. But these people stopped and they started speaking to us in German. And I had a friend of mine from Australia who was living in Germany. He could speak German, and he understood what you're saying, and he had a quick conversation with them, and they joked and had smiles on their faces and walked off. And we sort of looked at our friend and said, what was that all about? And he said, they wanted to know if we were in a band and if we were going to the Wacken Festival, and they were really excited. And then when they found out that we were from Australia, they were really excited and just wanted to say, you know, welcome and hope you have a good time. And we're just looking at each other going, you know what? You would never see that in Australia, and no. That's what makes Germany and especially that style of music so great in that country. But then, just to tie back into what I was saying before about talking to the people that would normally stereotypically be opposed to that lifestyle, if you look at Wacken, you look at the DVDs, and especially in the early years of how they transformed this small town into this thriving business. The people, the local community who might not even like metal music have all jumped on board because they can see the economic benefits of it. These people don't have to work for the rest of the year. They work for probably a week straight, either side of the festival. They stock up on supplies. The elderly people are out the front of their houses selling whatever. The kids are out there trying to deliver water, and they've got alcohol, you know, and you can stop by and pick up stuff. The local supermarkets and whatever are all stocked up, and people make a shitload of money, and everyone's so welcoming. And people realise that most people that are going to these festivals are super cool. They're all there from a like-minded point of view. They all want to have a great time, and people are understanding the benefits because they can see it. And that's something that's not in Australia because the older generation aren't exposed to that. They don't see the benefits of what could be. And, you know, sometimes I think probably us as Australians who like metal music, there's probably not enough people that are being proactive to try and bring the two worlds together. But, you know, that's why metal's in the mainstream charts in Europe and in Germany specifically, because it's seen as a financially viable form of art, and people can commercialize it and they can make money out of it, and you can say that's, you know, not genuine, it's not, you know, it's what's the word, that's tarnishing the creativity side of things by making it into the mainstream media and whatever. It doesn't matter, because in the end it's being accepted by the masses whether they like it or not, and as a result of the acceptance, it's had an opportunity to be able to be pushed through the mainstream media and to be able to put onto radio, onto TV, and for festivals to, and the number of festivals in Germany is incredible. And it's not just that one festival dominates and the rest of them, you know, get the dregs. A lot of those festivals, you know, get tens of thousands of people, and it does amazing things, no doubt, for their economy. So they get it. But I think probably the organisers of Wacken probably spent a lot of time in the early formation stages by bringing the community in and having them involved and making them a part of it and pitching it to them and speaking in their language that makes it make sense to them. And maybe that's what needs to happen more in Australia, where people need to reach out to those opposing views and go, hey, what are your concerns, and what can I do that's going to speak your language and get you excited about the possibilities of this? And it might be money, it might be purely money, but we need to be able to show that it can be a viable thing and it can have great benefits to the local community and to the society in general in the country. So,
because obviously, I think another important factor is, like, obviously security for them. Because I mean, if these people are coming into their town, you know, they want to be reassured that nothing's going to, you know, bad's going to happen. But I mean, every time that I've gone to Wacken, it's like you would be walking around and then you would see the locals walk around because the festival organizer, well, there's two of them, Thomas Jensen and forgot his name, but obviously sorry?
I always remember Thomas's name, and I never remember the other guy's name.
Well, yeah, Thomas is more in the limelight. The other guy, I think it's Olaf, because there used to be a third person, which was a chick, but I think she got bought out by Thomas and Olaf, I think that's his name. And obviously they've been running it ever since. But you know, they take care of the locals, and you see them, and they're given like all access passes and stuff, and you see them walking around, and they don't feel they're going to be attacked, or they don't feel insecure or anything like that.
Or even out of
because
place.
Obviously, no. I mean, the generation gap at that place is like, you'll see like age from 6 to 85 and onwards. It's like, you know, it's so broad and so amazing to see. It's like you'll see a young family, and then like a middle-aged family, and then you'll see like your typical sort of grey-haired sort of metalheads decked to the halls with leather, and then you got like your typical sort of rural German family, and you know, and then you're obviously all your elderly couples and stuff, and it's quite varied. It's not just a sea of black t-shirts. It's like it's quite varied. But obviously, touching on what you said, it's like, take for example, if you know, Soundwave did that with the local businesses and said, hey, you know, what if you open up one of your shops, or invite some of the residents and say, hey, look, do you want to come down and have a look at this? And obviously, if you've got any questions about it or anything like that, and then obviously we can tell you the benefits of, I'm sure they already did that anyway. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know the inner workings of AJ's mind, or, you know, whatever, but I'm sure that discussion would have come up at some point. But even if it didn't, it's like, well, that's an obvious thing that you would do. And then you think, well, you know, all you're doing is reassuring the community that, you know, these people are here to have a good time. They're obviously, like with anything, it doesn't matter if it's heavy metal or dance music or whatever, you're going to occasionally get, you know, the odd fucking idiot, but they're heavily, they're usually heavily outweighed by all the good people, because, you know, they're there to have a good time and spend their money and, you know, whatever else. But yeah, like you said, I think that's very important. Like, hopefully, if this this Legion Festival sort of gets up and running, then I'm sure John Sankey will have the same idea, or I'm sure he's already had it in his mind, because at one point everyone thought that was going to be a camping thing, and then it sort of went back to like the Soundwave formula of like this travelling festival or whatever. But then even going back to the download thing we were speaking of before, like the Australian version of download, like early this afternoon, because we put up the post on the Facebook page, and someone sort of mentioned, I'm going to say this isn't going to work because it's logistically impossible and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, the difference between, the money coming from an overseas market compared to the Australian market is tenfold. It's like, if you look at like Live Nation, they tour, Black Sabbath and all these huge bands. Not that I'm saying that AJ can't afford those bands or whatever, but it's like they have a reputation of constantly bringing out humongous bands, and they have ridiculous amounts of money. I mean, I think they take care of Rush in, pretty much all of the world. I mean, except here, because they've never toured here. So hopefully one day, but I doubt that's going to happen. Yeah. But, you've got this institution that has been established for so many years and has a strong foothold in not only its local market of Canada and America, but it's branched out and said, okay, well, let's go to Europe. Okay, let's go to Australia now. Let's go to Asia. And you look at that and you go, okay, they've pretty much got a dominant foothold over the whole planet, live music and entertainment. And then you sort of look at AJ and everyone's like, oh, it's not going to work because his idea didn't work. And it's like, well, I'm sure his idea would have worked if A, he had a bit more money, and B, didn't mouth off every 5 seconds on Twitter. But looking at it from a business perspective, it's like you could essentially have a camping festival in Australia if you wanted to, but there would be obviously important factors like of where to have it. I mean, if I were to put one on, I would put it in a rural town, either in Victoria or New South Wales, have it close to public transport, and obviously have a town which they would accept, an influx of people, and then you would explain them and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have 10,000 or 20,000, even 30,000 plus people coming from all around Australia, potentially even from around the world. We have all these bands playing. These people, not only in bands, but all these patrons are going to be stocked up with cash, and they want to be buying alcohol and food and necessities like chairs and, blow-up pools or blow-up dolls or whatever that's like to throw around the festival grounds or whatever else. And then if you sort of explain to them that way and think, okay, well, it's not only beneficial for them, but it's beneficial for our town because it's going to put us on the map. And it's the same with Varkin, which is literally named after the town. And then you've got, all these other camping festivals as well that have actually worked. And I'm sure that's where they've sat down with the town, because they can't just go into a town and say, all right, we're taking over, because, then there'll be disputes and complications and whatever else. Obviously, if you look at what they've been doing, they've sort of gone around and said, okay, where can we go which is close to an airport or public transport, is economically viable for us to get our trucks and everything else in there and back, and also for the patrons as well, because, we don't want them spending 3 times as much to go out there and then having no money to spend or whatever else. But then you look at something like Unify, the Unify gathering, even though it's very small and it's a niche market, it obviously works because they've tailored it to a specific demographic. But even if you don't like hardcore or metalcore music, still a lot of metalheads go there because, if they've sort of branched out from that typical only like these 3 bands, that frame of mind, then obviously they're going to go out and listen to new music and experience it and whatever else. And I've had numerous people to go to these things, and they've said that comparing it to a European festival, it's literally exactly the same. It's like occasionally, you get the odd idiots, but, they're dealt with by security, and they'll say either, calm down or we'll throw you out. And everyone's entitled to bring their own alcohol, but obviously you can't be allowed to drink it in the stage area. Obviously, they've got their own bar areas, which is essentially what Varken do as well. It's like they welcome you to bring your own alcohol. Obviously, no bottles, no sharp objects, the typical sort of stuff. And it's the same with the Unify gathering, and it's like, well, they're still making money. They're still allowing the patrons to have some sort of freedom and whatever else. But obviously, when they go to the music area, obviously they're padded down, so they make sure they don't have knives or glass or anything like that. And obviously that's how it works. It's like it's a team effort. It's not just just one guy making a decision and that's pretty much it. It's like it's a decision made by numerous parties, but to actually make them all agree with each other, especially in Australia, is what nowadays it looks completely impossible. But if you constantly sort of keep at it and obviously have good viewpoints or a logical explanation, then they may sort of sit down and go, okay, well that makes sense, continue. And then potentially something good can come out of that. But I think it's, like I said before, it's a long way off. But if all these big touring companies or big promoters with shitloads of cash are interested in buying up some sort of market here, then okay, I'm all for it, because obviously they've had not only exposure managing bands, managing tours, like major tours, but then they've had great exposure and experience managing these big festivals like Download and Sonosphere and all these other festivals that are very similar to each other. So I'm one of those people that's like, okay, well I'm open to the idea of it. If it's going to work, who knows? Obviously it's a joint effort, but generally speaking, I think everyone thought, the music travelling festival and the like is all dead, done and dusted because Soundwave's gone. It's like, not necessarily. At one point Australia never had anything. It's like we had no Soundwave. We had Big Day Out, which had 3 or 4 metal bands, and that was pretty much it. But obviously the social aspect of it, and also the viewpoints of these investors or these stakeholders or whatever, they're actually realising, okay, there's actually money in heavy metal, much like the people see it in Germany, like you pointed out before. It's like, okay, this is a viable market. It's a viable art form. From their perspective, it's like, okay, let's take advantage of it because we're going to get money out of it. But to everyone else, it's like, okay, sweet, we get what we want. We get to go see Steel Panther, and then I'll go across and I'll go see Devin Townsend, and I'll go see, some black metal band from Norway no one's ever heard of. It's like there's so much choice to choose from, but to get it at that point where it is in Europe, then obviously it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's easy for everyone to hate on social media and whatnot, but in the end, I think as much as you can fault AJ for some of his decisions or actions that he's had over the years, he still had a pretty good stab at the festival, touring festival format, and bringing a lot more heavy music to the public eye in Australia. And I think people, exactly what you said, are going to look at it and go, you know what, that format works and it can work even better. And I can see where there can be improvements and I can see opportunity, and I can run with that existing format and improve on it this time. And that's where, whether it be this Legion Festival next year or whether it be, a Download Live Nation thing or whatever else, mm-hmm. I think we'll definitely see something again, and whether it be another attempt or another couple of attempts, it will eventually stick, and I think people will see that it makes sense. It is something that's financially viable, and they'll turn around and go, you know what, for all the great things that Soundwave did, I can identify a long list of things where they could have taken a much better approach, which we'll be able to do. And that might be certain things from in the formative stages of the festival and planning it. Let's get all the communities together. Let's get the local councils together. Let's get them involved at the start to make them feel like they're a part of it, and don't work in a sense that I'm going to create something, and if you don't like it, then you can piss off.
You don't want to isolate yourself. That's the main thing.
That's it. You got to get everyone on board. And if you get them on board early, and that might just be one thing out of a long list of things that could be looked looked at as opportunities for future, festival promoters and booking agents and whatnot. So it's
because I can understand what AJ was going through, because if you're too transparent with your audience, they're going to be expecting way too much out of you. Like, obviously, he would leak certain hints and say, "Oh, I've got this really good band coming and blah blah blah," and he'd sort of make hints about it and stuff. And everyone would be like, "Oh, and even I've had a stab of, like, I mentioned to him, when are you going to bring Manowar out?" But, it's like, obviously that'll never happen because they're probably expecting too much money or whatever. But when you're running a business, like, for the general Joe Blow, it's like, oh, it's not that hard. And it's like, yeah, okay, try running a business with, literally millions of dollars, and you've got a specific budget you've got to work to. And then, you're not only trying to make your fan base happy, but you're trying to make your stakeholders happy. You're trying to make every state happy by not, or the whole country in itself. You don't want to bring out a band that has, like, a reputation, like, we have instances in the past where, bands like Cannibal Corpse and Mayhem and Marduk and stuff have tried to be banned from Australia because of their their lyrics or their political or religious views of, what they did in the past when they were teenagers or whatever. But I think a lot of people gave AJ a bit of a bad rap. I mean, I know, look, he did fuck up, obviously, and he wasn't very open with where the money was going and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, you have to be a bit of an asshole to be in that business. And even, I mean, obviously, John Howarth, I mean, he did a video recently on his Facebook page, and he was saying that, music isn't everything. You've got to, push yourself and go out there and do what you need to do to actually make an impact. And whether it be if you sort of got to lie through your teeth a bit or sugarcoat some things and not tell anyone anything else, it's like, well, that's what you got to do to sort of make the business continually run. And looking back again about what AJ did, and obviously I don't agree with what he did, but from a marketing and a business perspective, it's like, well, you have to be cutthroat in this industry, because if you're too nice and you're too lovey-dovey, everyone's just going to take advantage of you, and then you're just going to end up with nothing. So I think
it definitely needs that balance. You need that balance, and I think that's probably more of a general business, being business savvy, but also understanding, from a marketing point of view. Because I think in a sense it was quite genius for him to be as vocal as he was on Twitter, because he definitely built an audience and a reputation, and people paid attention to him. And in some ways, especially with the younger generation who are very, social media savvy, I think they felt like they had a say and they had a bit of an influence on the festival, whether that was the reality or not. But because they could interact directly with him, and he would respond, and he would also drop hints or make comments, even if it was unrelated to the festival or not.
I mean, whether that was his intention or not to get the audience involved, it still worked. I mean,
it still worked. That's right. But
I mean, he called people cunts and everything else, and
there's definitely a line, and you need to have that balance. You need to be able to know when to switch off, and then when you can freely interact with people, and it could have been utilised a hell of a lot better. But look, I mean, now's the opportunity for other people on the outside to go, you know what, there were a lot of positives around that format and the way that it was put together, and there are opportunities from the mistakes that were made or the things that weren't capitalized on, and we can probably do an improvement on what it was previously, and whether that be the end product or a dramatic improvement would be yet to be seen. But at least people can then turn around and safely say, well, we have taken the positives of what that was, and we've been able to build on it and make it bigger and better. And so I think it'll definitely come back. And whether, I don't know about the Legion thing, and I think we'll probably leave that for another discussion later on. But I mean, it's still good in the sense that there are people out there that are showing interest and are still trying to keep things alive and keep the interest in live music there. And it's definitely there's a money pit there. There's in a good sense, there's a lot of money in there to be made, and a lot of great positives for the economy here in Australia, for whether it be locally or nationally, and you just have to get the right people involved.
One thing I noticed after the cancellation and all this sort of stuff, everyone's like, oh, what are we going to do? And there's no more shows to go to. And it's like, you do realise there is a local scene that's like thriving in your own fucking backyard.
Yeah.
Why don't you go to one of those shows? But even then, it's like the amount of shows that have come, like local shows and local tours that have come up in the last 2 or 3 months has been quite astounding. I mean, you've got, in the span of 2 weeks, we've had, or will have, we had Voyager last week, we got Lagerstein, we had a lot of local bands doing local releases, like we had In Malice's Wake and In Venom do stuff. We had Truth Corroded come through town, and we've got, even like bands playing new venues that, they wouldn't necessarily would have played in the past. So it's like, there's various outlets to, where you want to have your music and where you want to see it. It's not just like the typical same 3 venues anymore. It's a bit more broad and open now, but to actually get that across to the status quo or the Triple M listeners or whatever you want to call them is a bit of a mission in itself, because like you said before, they're very stuck in their ways, and unless it's appealing to them outside of whatever they like, then they're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So I think from a general perspective, the amount of shows that are coming.
Okay, you there?
All good?
Yeah, all good. So
did you put in a new battery?
Yeah, I've put new batteries in, so that's probably an indication that we've certainly been gas bagging.
So we can only talk for 6 hours now.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Do you want to just go back to what you're saying, if you can remember?
Just about with the live stuff. I mean, obviously there's a big potential for local bands to expand their products or whatever else. But, it's trying to get these weekend warriors or, Triple M listeners or whatever you want to call them to obviously go to these shows. That's literally a mission in itself. But I think it's not only it's like a social thing, but obviously a lot of these bands need to take a bit more action with the way they promote shows, or a lot of the times they may not necessarily think they'll need one, but it's like, you even look at the well-established bands in Australia, like, you say Croptics or your Truth Corroded or whatever, and they'll send out a press release even for like a small tour or, new music video or something like that. And it's like, well, it generates buzz for that upcoming tour or that product or album or whatever it is. And I've always sort of influenced a lot of local bands to do the same thing. And it's like, well, obviously you don't want to have a press release for everything. It's like, Davo farted, let's send it out to the local media outlets. It's like, no, you sort of do it for the important stuff, like, your national tours and your album launches and all that sort of stuff. And then potentially that could be picked up by Beat or Impress or obviously Us or, Heavy Magazine or any of the like, there's numerous metal outlets in Australia that are still running, and, webzines and radio stations and whatnot that obviously pick it up and promote it where they see fit. But it has become very hard, but there's also ways to get around that. And there's very easy things that obviously that you know as well. Like, you know, obviously you've promoted Lord and Dungeon for quite some time. So, you know, it's essentially just looking at the market and looking at what these big bands are doing and then sort of following suit, but then put your own twist on it and, you know, generate buzz through your own means. And even if it's doing something a bit silly, or, I mean, you take, for example, like the King Parrot videos, it's like to all the metalheads, it's like, oh, that's pretty funny or whatever. But then to everyone else, it's like, I'll start watching it and I think, oh, what's this? This is a bit interesting. And it's, you know, obviously it's a bit different to what they're expecting. And obviously it's worked. I mean, the popularity and the reach that King Parrot have gotten, not only in Australia, but in around the world is phenomenal. So I think if more local bands sort of take on that initiative, and, you know, take the time to do, whether it be like a small business course or read a book about business or managing not only yourself but your business, because a lot of them think that, oh, you know, my material is really good and I'm going to get signed next week and then after that I'm set for life. And it's like, I'm sorry, it's not the 1980s anymore. No one's going to come up to you after a show and sign you instantly. It's like, it's a lot easier to get your product out there, but it's a lot harder as well because you're competing with literally thousands of other bands as well. So, you have to stand out from everyone else, but to do that, you need to, you know, push your promotion a lot more and push yourselves as well. Like if you're treating your band as a business and you want it to succeed, then obviously the two things that to a successful business is marketing and innovation. And if you don't have either, then, you know, you're not going to succeed. Because obviously if you're marketing yourself, it's great, like you're getting yourself out there and whatnot. But if you don't have any innovation, if you're not literally reinventing the wheel in some, and I'm not saying musically, but like promotionally or socially, then obviously you're just going to sit there and, like, you know, you sort of see it happen. I mean, I saw this happen a couple of times. Like, you would have like local bands and they'll sort of start out okay, and then they'll get disgruntled, and then they'll write some, you know, aggressive statement on their Facebook page about, oh, record labels are shit and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, okay, fair enough, but you probably didn't even do anything to. I mean, they probably didn't even email the you know, the right people or whatever. So if one person says no, you think, okay, I'll email that guy again. I'll email him in a couple of weeks or whatever. But then I'll go to the next person. I'll go to the next person until you find some sort of, you know, crevice where you can crawl into and you think, okay, there's another room in the next area. I can go to that. And then you sort of walk through it and you keep pushing through and trying to go to the next area and then trying to, you know, until you got an opportunity to actually open the door and you think, wow, it's a lot easier than trying to, you know, crawl through a little crack in the wall. I can actually open the door now and go through it. So,
yeah.
But to obviously get to that point, I mean, I know, like, with you trying to promote your music and your products and everything, I'm sure you've done, you know, pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're about to go down rabbit hole number 2. As far as topics go, because this could be 6 hours of conversation just in itself. But I mean, I think we should probably dedicate.
Yeah, sorry, I'm.
Yeah. No. But this is you're getting me rolled up because this is something that I could talk about for hours. But so I think we should definitely dedicate a podcast to this because it's such an important thing that gets ignored by so many people, and sometimes not intentionally. I think people just they're not aware of it. They don't understand what they're not doing, not so much what they're doing wrong, but what they're not doing. And I mean, we're certainly not perfect. I mean, I'm only as good as the time that I've got to invest in it. And I've certainly, I've struck gold at times where I've done really well, and other times where I've just dropped the ball big time. And for various reasons, sometimes it might just be that my head's not in the right spot, or it might be time poor, or I might just have made just a shit decision, and that's just what it is. But I mean, I guess the thing that I always try as best to try and take pride in is that we will try and do things differently. We'll try things at least once to see if it works. If it fails, it fails, but at least we know we've given it a shot. And there are things that a lot of other bands are doing that are quite successful that we haven't bothered to try and do. And, a lot of it's just because we just don't have the resources, and other things is we might just not be as assertive as we should be. But, I still think that I guess it's probably the positive is that even for us, where I like to think to a degree we do quite well with how we promote our band from a DIY point of view, because we don't enlist a lot of external people to help us push our product. And whether, a lot of people may disagree on that decision, and I think in some cases it hurts us, in other cases it doesn't. But it's good to know that despite our limited resources that we do have, that we have been able to have some reasonable success with the decisions that we've made and the efforts that we have put in over the years. And it's exciting to know that despite all of that, that there are still so many opportunities and things that we can do better as a band, or I can do better just as somebody that wants to promote, whether it be my own band or this podcast or other people's music or anything of the such, because there's just so many opportunities out there, and you don't have to follow the old formula of, well, this is just how a band does things. They record, they release, you send out a press release to the local haunts to let them know. You do your little tour. You might do a video clip if you got a little bit of money on the side, and then you go back and you repeat that cycle again. And we're starting to see, and King Parrot's an amazing example of a band that certainly does not have commercially appealing music whatsoever, but has been able to carve out such a huge following within a market that is quite saturated. But they've been able to really capitalize on a visual aspect and a culture that they've been able to create around their music, where a lot of people have been gravitated towards their music due to the culture that they've been able to create, of very much embracing their Australian background, their imagery, their merchandise, and as you said before, their video clips are amazing and definitely spark a lot of interest, and people want to be a part of it. They're very much working class. They're not prissy, they're not prima donnas. They get out there, they're work dogs, and a lot of people appreciate that. So I think as a side effect, people then get into the music, which is very much the opposite of what a lot of other bands do, where they try so hard for people to like their music first and then try and capitalize on that. So, but it just goes to show that there's just so many things out there and options and opportunities that bands can have, and there's no set rule book. There are things that work better than others, but there's nothing to say that you can't try an idea and see whether it works or not. And especially now where you don't have the record label support like you used to, and a lot of it's accessible, and you are a needle in a haystack with so many other bands out there, and you have to try and separate yourself. It is a good opportunity to be able to start doing things that are a little bit outside the box, to start separating yourself and get people's attention. So it's, I see, I could get on a soapbox and rant about all the things that bands in this country aren't doing that they should be doing. And bands that, for me, frustrate me because there's such a wealth of talent, and the possibilities for them are so, so varied, but they're not doing themselves any favors by putting in even just the fundamentals of getting, of promoting their product and promoting their music and building a loyal fan base and getting people, to be a part of what they're doing. And it might be a case that they just don't understand it, or they're, or completely ignorant to it. But I think I might have to, we'll have to do a part 2 or a part 3 or a part 4 where we just talk about at least in Australia anyway, and it will transcend to other markets as well, but at least from our experiences with the local scene, and maybe highlight a lot of the things that bands are doing here that probably aren't doing themselves any favours, or more importantly, the things that they aren't doing. And there's certainly a lot of things here that I think, a lot of local musicians and a lot of Australian bands aren't satisfied with, the amount of people that come out to live shows. They aren't satisfied with the number of people that are following them on social media. They aren't satisfied with the number of views that they're getting on a video clip, or the number of CDs or T-shirts that they're selling. But they're not willing to do the other things that will lead them to those results. So, yeah, I think
sort of. It reminds me of that episode of South Park with the Underpants Gnomes. They got they're like their business plan. It's like phase 1 is collect underpants, phase 2 is a question mark, and then phase 3 is profit. So it's just like they want to have a profit, but they have no idea how to actually get to it. They're just like, we'll get to it somehow. So
yeah, absolutely. But I think I think we're both pretty passionate about it, and I think we've both been to enough shows, and we know enough people within the Australian scene where I think we've definitely at least got a bit of a right to weigh in on an opinion and throw a few things out there. And I think maybe if we dedicate an episode just to it, then we might attract a few extra listeners that might be at least can listen critically and provide their feedback. But it's I think you need, and it's starting to happen. There's a lot of bands out there that are starting to raise the bar and are getting a lot more international recognition. And as a result, you're starting to see a lot more bands going, you know what, I'm starting to see what the formula is. I see what I have to do in order for people to take notice of me. So now I need to up the ante and raise the bar a little bit. But it's still, in the grand scheme of things, few and far between. And I think you still need a lot more bands out there that need to understand that it's not just about the love of the music, and that is definitely a part of it. But if you want to be in a band that has a fan base, and you want to be in a band that can produce music, can have a little bit of an income to at least support the recording and the release of music, you can do a tour or whatever it might be, then you need to start thinking of it, as you said earlier, about it being a business. And, it might not seem like the true way or anything like that, or for some of these purists out there who are stuck in their mother's bedroom, or in their bedroom at their mother's place or whatever. I don't know why they'd be in their mother's bedroom, but anyway, that's a story. But those purists that go, that's all selling out. Well, I think, unfortunately,
but that's what they want.
That's exactly it. And a big problem that we've had in the Sydney scene in the past is that we've given too much attention to the bands that don't put the effort in. We've been so desperate to put on live shows that we book any band, and sometimes it ends up being a mate that we've got drunk with at the pub at a previous local gig, and because he's a mate, we'll put his band on. But don't worry that his band sucks balls, or his band doesn't bother to do any promotion, or his band rocks up with with nobody and expecting to just play in front of the other band's crowds and not do anything whatsoever to help out. And we've allowed that for so long, where we've got these little circles of mates that put on gigs for each other, and then you try and convince people to come out. And on those odd occasions that you do manage to pry someone off the couch, get them to a local show, and then that's what they see in a venue that might be a bit subpar to start off with, which is already not helping the situation. But then you've got 3 or 4 bands, or sometimes these people put on 12 bands at a time, and it's just exhausting. But you put on multiple bands, and they're all subpar. Points for effort, points for them, trying to do original music and whatever, but they aren't at a level that should be on stage playing in front of people. No one's putting in any effort because there's no environment, there's no vibe in the area because there's no one there. So the room's empty. And you stand there and go, should I do this again tomorrow night, or should I do it again next Friday night? You know what? I might just go to my local pub down the road out in the suburbs, because I know there's going to be people there and at least some form of atmosphere. And maybe there might be a Metallica tribute band there, and I'll know all the songs, and I'll go there and get pissed and sing along to that. So, I think that's been a flaw that we've had in Sydney, is that when we had venues starting to close down, we were so desperate to try and ramp up the gigs in a limited number of bars, and we were just booking mates. We weren't trying hard to book quality. We weren't putting pressure on people. To me, and look, I don't book shows for other bands, but if I was a local promoter, I would only reward the bands that put the effort in. And you can definitely give a band a shot for the first time and go, you know what, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Come on board. Let's see what you got. And if they fail miserably and they're crap, or they don't bother to put any effort in, then you don't book them again. And word gets out.
Well, I mean, I've done the same with like choosing supports for certain tours. Like you have, for example, one band that does exceptionally well, and you think, okay, they did really well, so we'll reward them in the future or whatever. But then we've had other bands that have come on and they're like, musically they're amazing, but like from a promotional point of view, they just literally suck dog balls, because it's like they're sort of stuck in their own world, and it's like, oh, I've got all these great ideas, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it's like, well, you're putting the cart before the horse. You got to generate buzz somehow. You can't just go to this show and expect all your albums to sell out and all this sort of stuff. But, I've had instances where I've chosen really good bands, and this is obviously back in the past when I was sort of choosing for certain tours and stuff, obviously when I was given the opportunity to do so. And I was sort of thinking, okay, well, this band is really good. They promote themselves really well. And then sometimes you get caught off guard and you think, oh, okay, I won't do that again. But then over time, I'm just sort of thinking, well, obviously these supports are meant for good bands that do a good job, not only play well and have good music in their repertoire or whatever, exceptionally at promoting their own product, and they're good business-minded people. And obviously that's where I've sort of come in and thought, well, it helps when, A, you've got a really good band that everyone likes, and B, they can promote themselves, and they promote themselves well, or they may have like the backing of a small label or a distributor, and they'll be like, okay, well, they're promoting as well. So, and it's like, well, everyone's helping each other out. It's not just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to help out fucking Steve-O and his Drongo band. And it's like, well, no one's going to feel sympathy for you if it's your first gig or whatever. It's like, well, you got to work hard. And it's like in any sort of job, it's like you're not going to come in and think, oh, I'm so sick, and, expect sympathy from your whole, from your workmates when they're trying to work 3 times as hard as you are to get ahead. So
it just sends a message out to everybody else out there. And if you've got Joe Blow in his garage with his mates that are busting out Pantera covers or whatever it might be, and want to get out there and play some shows, and and with some original music or whatever, that they're able to see that, looking out there, that, it's really difficult to get a gig. It's really difficult because the standard's so high, and we can't just go, oh yeah, we've got 4 songs and we'll throw in, another 5 Pantera covers, and it's pretty bog and we can't even finish a song properly, and, we haven't bothered to get a banner or do anything, any of the basic stuff in our stage performance isn't up to par, but you know what, we can play a gig anyway. But people start to realize, it's really hard to get a show, and in order to get a show, looking out there and seeing who the other people are that are getting the gigs, we need to spend a bit more time honing our craft, getting a bit more of the visual aspect down to play, maybe even having a demo ready to go, and having some quality recordings. And, it might set you back another 6 months, but you know what, at least when you come out, you're going to have a better reaction, you're going to have more longevity, you're going to hang around longer, and it's better for the scene. It just sends a message out to everybody that, you can really have such a great impact and be a band and a successful musician within the local scene. But it's, as you said, it's like a job. You've got to prove your worth, and unfortunately we're in Sydney, at least, and I've seen it in other places, but especially in Sydney, we're rewarding people that aren't putting the effort in. and the bar is just so low that it's just ridiculous. And that's one of many issues that we've had in Sydney over the last few years, and obviously the things out of our control, such as the lockout and all the laws and whatnot. I mean, that's one thing, but we still, if that was the only thing we had to worry about, I think we'd still find a way to have a successful live scene. It might end up moving more into the suburb areas, and there'd be more opportunities out there, because in the end, if there's a popular band and people like the music, there will be a venue that will be able to cater for it no matter what, and you will find opportunities because it will be viable for a venue to have them on. But when we complain about how crappy the laws are and how it's killing the music scene and whatever, but at the same time we keep putting on the same shit gig with 30 or 40 payers rocking up, then how are you going to argue the point that you're missing out? The live scene's suffering because of this. So it's but anyway, I'm already getting on my soapbox again. And
no, look, I completely understand, because when I went over to Germany, here we go, I'm mentioning Germany again. I had the opportunity to go to Nuclear Blast Records because I made friends with one of their sort of higher ups during the Nightwish tour, the not the recent one, but the previous one, when they toured with Sabaton. And I got to know him, and I took him out around Melbourne and stuff, and I took I took a few of the members out from Nightwish and Sabaton to sort of take them out and let them have a good time and have a bit of R&R and stuff. And obviously when they were all having fun and whatever, I got to sit down with this guy and have a chat with him. And, we became friends, and he said, the next time you come to Europe, come over and I'll show you around and all that sort of stuff. So I went over and I had a chat with him, and then he took me out for lunch when I rock up to the Nuclear Blast headquarters. It's just a small warehouse. It's like out in the middle of nowhere in like country Munich. And I sit down, and these two guys walk up, and it's the vice president of Nuclear Blast Records and their A&R rep as well. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a bit confronting. But I had because I was traveling with Gary Carson, obviously. Yep. For the listeners out there, he does Screaming Symphony and is an all-round asshole.
In the most lovable way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I travelled with him, and obviously he sort of mentioned to me before they sort of sat down, he said, oh, yeah, I recognise that guy. That's the vice president. The other guy's the A&R rep. And we sat down, and they started talking to us and stuff, and we thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. I mean, there was no preconceived this is some business meeting or whatever. It's just like my friend invited me out, and he wanted me to introduce me and Gary to his friends. And then we thought, well, okay, while we're here, let's just have a discussion about music and stuff. And we sat there for literally like 2 or 3 hours just talking about, everything from like CD distribution and, CD fraud and stuff, and like, how certain places like in Asia or South America and stuff, where they'll have like counterfeit copies of their albums, or and they try to sell them online and stuff like that. And then even just generally speaking about what their process is of like signing bands and what they're after and all that sort of stuff. And we got to have a better understanding of what they wanted or what they were looking for. And then we went back to the Nuclear Blast office, and obviously they showed us around, and we got to know some of the staff, and they went to the sort of the main office where my friend works, and it's got like all the accolades of, the gold and platinum records of, all these bands that have obviously accumulated these records in the past. Majority of them are like Nightwish, and, they're sort of top tier bands like Avantasia, Ed Guy, Dimmy Berger, and a couple of others. And that was really amazing to see, because it's like not every day you think, oh, wow, that's like a gold and platinum metal album, like especially from like, a band like Nightwish or something. Obviously you hear about it, but when actually seeing it in front of you, you think, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing. But then, we went around the office a bit more and he started explaining more about how just like everything about the label, and it was just really eye-opening. And then when we left, we thought, well, how have all this information, let's try and take advantage of it and sort of share this information with the bands back in Australia. And, whenever we came across a band that we thought, not only me but Gary as well, because we sort of think on the same sort of level, but we sort of went back and said, what about potentially doing this, or have you thought about doing this, and maybe not do so much of this, and we'd sort of give him some helpful advice, and even if I thought the band had a really good product, I would say, okay, well, I could potentially send it over to one of the guys at Nuclear Blast. They can have a listen to it. Obviously, don't expect a label and the signage, contract or whatever in the mail in the next 2 weeks or whatever. It doesn't work like that. It's just, even if you get any feedback at all, it's fantastic. But we learned quite a lot from that, and that's how we've got to, I guess, motivate a lot of these bands as well. And I've sort of brushed off my understanding and knowledge of how these companies work onto these other bands. A lot of them take the advice and others don't even listen at all. So even if you gave them all the answers, some of them would be like, okay, sweet, thanks for that. And others would just, it'd be through one ear and out the other. So it's, you got that problem of people that are open-minded and think, okay, maybe I should not do so much of this, or maybe I should consider changing something a little bit different, because obviously it hasn't been working for the last 6 months. So maybe I should potentially look at changing something, as opposed to everyone else is just like, oh, what are you talking about? You're a nobody. No one's going to listen to you. And it's like, okay, well, continue what you're doing and see how far you get. And most of the time these bands end up just playing shitty pubs every week, and it's like, well, that's where you're sort of destined. If you want to do that, then that's fine. That's your your choice. But if you keep complaining and saying, oh, I want to support this band and I want to do this and I want to do that, and it's like, well, talking about it is one thing. You've actually got to have some sort of action or initiative going to actually push this idea. And it frustrates me when I see a band that I think is really good and I think has really good potential, and you try and talk to them, but they don't necessarily understand what's actually going on. Like, talking to all the experienced bands, even still, like, they may have been around for a few years or whatever, but they're still doing exactly the same thing. And it's like, well, you're still playing the same shows with the same bands and you keep complaining, why aren't we doing anything? And it's like, well, you've got to change something. And even bands that did successfully well in the past, they may have come back now and they're thinking, oh, okay, we supported whoever and we went over to Europe, so this is going to be a breeze to come back. And it's like they come back and it's like, no, that's not how it works. You literally have to start all over again. Mm. You have to push yourself and reach that, that plateau, which is, elevated itself 3 times more. Mm. So you've got to do 3 times as much work. But they're like, fuck it, that's too much hard work. Let's just go back to the pub or whatever and play the same shows. And it's like, it frustrates me because it's like these bands have so much potential, but then they just throw it all away because it's like, I understand, yeah, you have a family life, you got a job and this and that, but it's like, well, have certain roles in the band. It's like, okay, if John and Jeff take, turns in promoting the band, and Dave and Steve do, promo and publicity and whatever else, or take care of one social media page and the other guy takes care of the other, or, link them all together and just have one message and it all goes up on all of them, then obviously that's a lot easier than running around in circles. And, it's like the kid who leaves his homework till the last minute and then try and scrounges everything together in this ball of shit and turns it in, and he gets an F. And he's like, oh, you know, I didn't mean to do that. And it's like, well, you had all this time, all these opportunities to do what you wanted to do, and you just threw it away. You pissed it up against the wall because, you know, you thought you knew better or whatever. And it's like it doesn't work like that. It can't. I mean, if you ran a business like that, Christ Almighty, you'd crash and burn within the first week. So again, like we mentioned before, you got to treat it as a business, but with a business, you got to have, you got to have it as like a community. So don't just like handball all the work to one person and go, okay, since you know how to do emails and stuff, I'll just sit back and I won't do anything. It's like, okay, if you have a bit more time than the other people, it's like, okay, you take responsibility of that. But if some of the other guys have some spare time, maybe an hour or two in the evenings or during their lunch break or whatever, they can do some social media or network with whoever and then build upon that and keep growing. And then it's like, okay, potentially out of that we could get a manager. But then after that, it's like, a lot of bands think, oh, okay, when I get a manager, I don't have to do any more work. And it's like, hang on, that gives you an opportunity to work even more because you've got one person who's doing all this shit you were doing before with 5 people, and now one person's doing it. So you've got 5 people in your band or 4, whatever it is, that literally have all this spare time, and it's like, okay, what do we need to do now? So you have the next person go, okay, let's look at a designer for a new T-shirt design or new banners or some incentive like
so do the stuff that you wouldn't normally have the time to do, but now you've got
exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but obviously managers nowadays aren't managers of what they used to be. It's just like, you know, the mate's wife or girlfriend or you know, whoever, and it's like, okay, fair enough, but even if you found someone who was you know, and from an outside source or whatever, it's like you still have to work by their rules because they're taking all this workload from you, and they're like, okay, well, I'm doing this, so now this gives you an opportunity to do whatever. But even then, like, you see a lot of bands who say have quote unquote managers, and they still don't do anything, and it's like, well, what the fuck are you doing? It's like,
oh, they just. I think the big thing is that, and you've said it a few times, is just it's understanding that you can still be creative and have authenticity with the music that you record and you put out there and your live performance and whatnot. However, you have to treat it as a business, and if you're not willing to do that, then it's a hobby. And if it's a hobby, then you, unfortunately, and it might sound very blunt, but you have no right to be in the same domain as the people that treat it as a business, and you can't expect to have the same rights and the same outcomes as the people that treat it like a business. And until there becomes an awareness or an acceptance that you want to take it to that next level where you want to take it more seriously and turn it into a form of a business, then you need to sit there and wait and let the people that are working hard and have the right mindset to be able to, you know, take advantage of it and receive the opportunities that they deserve. But unfortunately, and you know, I mean, this conversation's going off on another tangent, but it's just, I think a lot of people need to be accountable, and it's people, punters need to be accountable, booking agents need to be accountable, venue owners need to be accountable, promoters need to be accountable, the bands themselves and the musicians themselves need to be accountable, and you know, the whole tired complaint about supporting the scene. I understand it, but at the same time, it's a worn out thing to keep saying because no one has any meaning behind that statement anymore, and it's more of a desperate thing to keep yelling out all the time. But no one's.
It's like those. I mean, I always have a poke at these people and yell out, "Oh, you know, I have rights," and it's like, well, it's like that joke that Steve Hughes had in his, obviously still has in his shows. It's like, well, no one cares. It's like, you can say you're offended, but it doesn't really do anything. It's not going to change anything. Yeah. It's just, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing for all of us, and it's good that we're having this conversation, and hopefully more people continue to talk about it. And I really think it's a good idea that we probably do a few more maybe topic. We'll think about it in advance to plan it, but we'll pick particular topics to talk about things like this, because I think the more that people talk about it and the more that people listen and are aware of the conversation, that eventually it'll rub off on people, and those standards will start to raise. The bar will get raised, because people will not just settle for Joe Blow and their shit band to go and play down at a venue in Sydney or anything like that. It'll be like, you know what, yeah, good on you guys for getting started and willing to try and put something together and create some original music and wanting to be a live band. That's great, and we want to give you as much support as possible. However, you're not quite there yet, and in order for you to be sort of recognised to be able to play at this particular venue or at these particular events or whatever, then these are the bare requirements that we ask of you. And I don't care that we get pissed on the alternative weekends and that we're best mates. You still get treated the same way as anybody else, and it might mean that there might be very clear-cut things, as you need a semi-professional recording, because almost everybody has the means now to be able to do a recording on the cheap and produce something of reasonable quality. It might be that you need some half-decent promo photos. You might need a proper press kit, and there might be certain aspects of that need to be ticked in order for them to be acknowledged and considered for any sort of live performance. But it's up to everybody within that scene, and it's from people that run the venues or book the bands at the venues. It's for the people that like yourself that work with webzines. It's for people in other bands that choose the lineups for their tours. It's for the punters that make the decisions of who to support and who not to. And sometimes, even though your mate's up on stage, if they're not quite there, then maybe that's a conversation that you should be having with your friends. And instead of saying, not going out and saying you're crap and you should be playing shows, but providing constructive criticism and providing encouragement to keep pushing them in the right direction that they want to be able to improve. It's not that you want to force people to be raised to a standard, but you want people to be enthusiastic and motivated to be the best that they can, and to understand that, I remember speaking to a band years ago about banners, and we've certainly gone off the rails in the last few tours, because and it's been part of the theme of just having crappy banners, a piece of cardboard with dicks all over it and whatever. But it's been it's been a bit
of mate.
Yeah, that's right. But it's been a bit of an entertainment aspect. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But one particular band just said, "Oh, we're not in a position to have a banner. It's a waste of money. We can't afford it. We've got more important things to do." And I turned around and said, "Well, how much do you think a banner is?" And they said, "Oh, well, we believe it's about $5,000. I said, "Well, hang on." I said, "You can get a banner for a couple $100. I said, you can get those side banners that from Officeworks and get them printed on. You could get a crappy vinyl banner and put it up. You could get anything and create a banner. If you really wanted to go old school, you could paint a banner on a bed sheet and it would still look better than having a blank wall behind you." And it's just those sort of attitudes that sometimes it's just a case that they don't know any better, but other times it's just pure laziness. And it comes back to everybody else saying, you know what, we need to create a live scene that flourishes, that attracts people to it, that people want to come out and see live music because they know that they're going to get their faces their ears blown away by fantastic original live music every time they come out. And there's just, it's like the glory days that everyone keeps talking about in the 80s with all the amazing Australian acts that were playing every pub and club around the place. But at that time it would have been a lot harder to get a gig because, there were certain things that people need to do in order to be recognised. And I think Melbourne's not too bad. I think Melbourne's got a great scene, and I think there's just so many bands down there that are at a a respectable level where they deserve to have shows and deserve to play. But Sydney's just not where it used to be, and I think it's going to be a case that somebody is going to have to come along, at least in the short term, and create something that's regular in a regular venue and maybe a new venue, and that might be tough in itself. But finding a new venue, making something regular, and only booking bands of quality, and setting that bar, and you're going to piss off a lot of people, but you have to start somewhere, and it might be that it takes a little while to take off, but somebody's got to go out there and really show the rest of the the metal fan base out there that are sitting in the suburbs and go, you know what, it is worth catching the train into the city. It is worth spending that extra time to get in. It is worth spending your money on the door entry and the drinks and whatever at the bar, because I can guarantee to you that you are going to have a night of quality original music, and we can guarantee that every week or every month or whatever it might be. And we just haven't had that in Sydney for a long time. But I think we might. I think we're getting to like the 2.5 hour mark. Actually, no, we're getting closer to the 3 hour mark. This is incredible.
Oh, okay.
So I might even have to split this into 2 episodes. I'll have a think about it. But I will definitely do a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4 down the track, because there's heaps of stuff to talk about. And I want to talk about all the other stuff that you do with the touring, even just to catch up on when we spoke a few months back about your decisions to move away from your job and try and take a stab at doing a lot of these things on a more full-time basis, and how that's going, and a lot of the things, the challenges that you've faced and whatnot. And there's just heaps of stuff to talk about, which is good. So we'll definitely do a few catch-ups in the future.
All right, I'll leave you to it then, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no dramas. All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. Cheers.
Right, see you, mate. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, as I always say. And thank you so much for enduring that epic of a podcast episode. As stated at the start, all the information, all the key points will be in the show notes. So definitely check them out. Any of the articles around lockout laws and things like that, something that I think we're, even from Anwar's point of view, I think he understands that whilst he might not be in Sydney, the problems that we have in the Sydney scene have an impact on the rest of the country, and even internationally as well. So I think it's definitely in everyone's best interest that if you do believe that this is, things need to change, then I strongly encourage you to get out there and share these articles and discuss this with more and more people out there. So yeah, all the details there. Make sure you check them out, etc., etc. Reach out to Anwar. I'll have some contact details on there, or just contact him via the Metal Obsession website. Let him know what you think of the podcast. Also, just a bit of housekeeping. Website, andysocial.net. You can search for me on Facebook. Just type in the Andy Social Podcast, or it's facebook.com/Andy Dowling Official. I'm on Twitter, Andy Dowling. The Lord stuff, if you just search Lord Official on most of the social network platforms, I'm on there. The band's on there. Andy Dowling on Instagram as well. I've become a bit of an Instagram whore. What else is there? Use the code word AndySocial on the Lord web store. So that's lord.net.au/store, and you get 10% off anything on that store. You can pocket that code for future reference. It's got no expiry date on it. It's just for you guys. And if you ever feel that you want to buy something from the store, then definitely dive in there and use that code. iTunes, rate, review, anything that you can do to pass this podcast around and share it to more people would be greatly appreciated. It definitely helps me get some more legitimacy with this podcast show, and helps me get more and more guests to agree to be on it. So for the people that have taken the time to rate and review it and share it and comment and like on Facebook and everywhere else, thank you so much, because it does mean a hell of a lot and has a big impact. So I really appreciate the time that you guys are taking out to be able to give back to what this thing's all about. Nothing nothing else as of yet. Still working out that date for our little podcast catch up. It will be the second last or the last Saturday in May. I'm just dragging my heels a little bit with this one, so no excuses there, but we'll have some more details in the coming weeks. But once again, thank you so much for everyone listening in, and a big thank you to those people that have got all the way to the end. I really love your work, and until next week, catch you later.